We'll call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Thank you. We'll do the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Somebody?
I will
approve the minutes.
and I'll second that.
We'll vote on that. Adrian?
Yes.
Brenda?
Abstain.
Amy?
Yes.
Weston?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
The minutes pass. The chairman has nothing to report. Does the vice chair?
I have nothing.
And the director?
Yeah, we have a couple of things. We'll take care of some updates on city business first. But just to let you know and remind you, we only have one meeting, Planning Commission meeting in December. And so there's not a second meeting, obviously. One of the things that means is that our meetings, and that meeting is probably going to have 5 or 6 items on it. And the first meeting in January is probably going to have 5 or 6 items on it. So if you're going to miss one of those 2 meetings, let us know so that we can make sure that we maintain a quorum for those. Otherwise, we're in a lot of trouble with scheduling things. The other thing too, just so you guys know kind of how the inner workings happen in the planning division, over the next month or so, we're going to be working on our list of 2019 priorities. A lot of those are informed on how we see things going, what the goals of the city are, what the needs of the city are. We know for a fact that next year housing is going to be a big focus for us. And when I say that, that's primarily along the lines of identifying and trying to find solutions to some of the barriers to housing. We've already started that. That's what the SRO ordinance was about. We're looking at, and you'll get an update, I think maybe your next meeting, on some potential changes to our multifamily zones, particularly addressing some of the townhome issues that we've had some problems with and that you guys grapple with all the time. So we'll share those with the commission, and then you guys can give us some feedback on that as well. Our priorities are primarily or ultimately determined by the elected officials, but we try to influence that through the implementation of our master plans and demonstrating the importance of those things. So we'll talk to you guys about that. Maybe at our, if it's not in the next meeting, it'll be the first meeting in January, or it could just be through an email type of thing to everybody. So there's that. And then the only other thing I have is that we wanted to, as is custom when we have commissioners who have completed 2 terms, we wanted to recognize Emily Drown for her 2 terms on the commission. And when Emily came on under the commission, it was a much different time than it is now in the city. I think if you remember, we were in the heart of at least the recession as it applied to Salt Lake City, and we were doing a lot of long-range planning types of things because we didn't have a lot of applications, and now here we are. So, Emily, we have a couple of things for you. One is a thank you letter from, I'll come up and hand them to you, but from the mayor, and then a recognition of your time. And if you want, I want to, on behalf of the city, thank you for your willingness to participate in the Planning Commission. It's, as everybody here knows, it's long hours. It's sometimes very difficult, but it's also very important for the future of the city. So thank you. And if you
Thank you.
I love this.
Honestly, I'm looking here at the board that I left not that long ago. You are an amazing powerhouse. You really are. And congratulations. You're in for a fun ride. And just driving around our city again, talking to people who are out in our city, what happens here makes a big difference. And they're passionate about it. So even though you're up till 10 or 11 at night here, and I'll be sending my thoughts, Have fun with this. Know that it's making a big impact, though. This is our city. You're defining our city. Just make sure there aren't any really long walls that don't have any interest, and make sure all 4 of them are decorated.
Emily, just curious, what was your favorite or maybe most important project or application that came to you while you were on the commission?
One that comes to mind where it was, you'll laugh, it wasn't one of the largest by any means, but this is when a community came together, and I thought this was a shoo-in. This is when I was chair, and I remember thinking, yeah, this will be a fast one. But this is when we had almost this motorcycle bike club come in, and this was for the one that was right behind Epic. And you had these young families come in and talk about this street that I had never even been on or even known about prior to being on the board. And we went on our, can you remember the name of the street? Edison Street, yes. With those very charming homes, had no idea it existed. People had sought out to live on that street, and they showed up along with the bike club to talk about how this would impact them, allowing trucks to access Epic. And I just remember thinking, wow, all these people showed up, and we had a pretty good group. They all showed up on their own time to make sure they let us know what a big impact this was going to be on the community and on potentially on kids. And that was a real positive, because Epic ended up working with the community to say, what can we do? So great things can happen here. We can be the arbiters and the brokers of some really good communication and change. And I know you have some exciting ones coming up.
Can I just say, I really enjoyed working with you, and you actually taught me quite a bit. And just the questions that you asked and the way you handled the meetings when you were chair, I really appreciate it. And so thank you for your time here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I wanted to thank you too for the encouragement. You know, when you're a brand new commissioner, it's a little scary.
Yeah, it is.
So thank you so much.
We're going to miss you. I wish that we could change the rules so you could come for another term, but you probably wouldn't do it.
I asked Paul if I can be a sub. Apparently,
That doesn't
not
work.
yet, not yet.
Bummer. Well, good luck in your future endeavors, and thank you for everything you did and that you taught the rest of us.
Thank
will be
you, and
greatly
keep
missed.
asking all the great questions. They're needed. I'll be back, of course. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Emily.
Okay, let's go on to item 1 here, the Mead Avenue Alley vacation. David.
All right, this is item number PLN PCM 2018-00666. It's a request to vacate a portion of Mead Avenue, which is a city alley. It's called Avenue, but it's a city alley located between 800 West and Jeremy Street. The reason for the request is based upon a concern of the alley being a magnet for crime and blight in the area. There's 4 criteria for alley vacations or policy considerations for alley vacations, and one has to be met in order for the city to consider vacating an alley. There are 7 adjacent property owners. 6 have signed the petition in support. The one that had not signed the petition was going to come to the meeting tonight for more information. They weren't necessarily opposed to it. Picture on your screen shows the location of Mead Avenue. It's between 800 West and I said Jeremy Street. So it's that section only, although the alley goes all the way to 900 West. The alley itself was created between 2 subdivisions. To the north is the Albert Place sub, which was platted in 1890, 2 years after the Muscatine sub to the south, which was platted in 1888. So might have originally been planned as a street, but it ended up as an alley between the 2 subdivisions. Planning Commission took a field trip out there. We didn't have a chance to drive down the alley, and it would have been a little arduous with the big van, but some photos of the alley as it exists. This is the east-west segment, or east-west going, heading west towards 900 West. And there's also a north-south alley that intersects with Mead Avenue, and it runs between Dalton and Mead. That is not part of the vacation request, but in the internal review process, Transportation pointed out that that alley would become a dead end and less usable if Mead were vacated. Again, this is where Mead intersects with Jeremy Street, so that would be the termination of the application would terminate there. And again, we said that the policy consideration for an alley vacation for processing had been met, and they cited public safety concerns. Now, in our review, in talking with the police, they sent us a number of reports, and they didn't think that the police reports didn't indicate that there was evidence that the alley was problematic. In their words, it was not alarming, the amount of crime and things like that. However, that is the residents' perception. So, considerations and staff analysis, we were looking at the fact that the alley physically exists and is passable with a passenger vehicle. That closure of the alley would make that north-south alley into a dead end and make it less usable. And potential future uses for the alley have not been fully explored, whether that could be for access to an ADU in the future. Nothing on city plans indicates that there are specific plans for that alley. However, we're looking at it in the context of what are some of the other potential uses. And again, with the creation of the alley, the applicant for the alley vacation actually lives in the subdivision to the south, so were it vacated, the property could not actually be conveyed by the city to that owner. It would have to go to the property owners in the north. Case law in the Utah court supports that. So as such, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a negative recommendation to the City Council in regard to the alley vacation.
Any questions for David? Okay, why don't you step back and we'll get the applicant up here. Yep. Now it's your turn. Please state your name for the record. Into the mic.
I'm James Kiefert. I'm the applicant.
And I'm Clint Lindberg, and I am the neighbor directly behind him, so I'm the second applicant, sort of.
So we are both the south neighbors, and as David pointed out, we would not be receiving any of the property. And I only say that in a form of like, this is not for property gain. This is like altruistic purposes of we want it closed. When I was the one that went around and gathered all the signatures from the neighbors, and every single one of them had some story. And I was kind of surprised that when David relayed to me the fact that there was not a lot of police reports, because several of them said they had. And I think for every one that they had called, there was at least a couple dozen of incidents where they had not called the police due to, you see it, you either get rid of it or Clint will have some examples of that. I did bring on my phone some pictures if that kind of illustrate what David showed, but it shows kind of where I think it missed some of the aspects that the alley is in a very poor state. It has very big potholes. Any car that goes through there, if they're smart, will travel very slowly, and that seems to not happen as much as we'd like. My fence has been ran over twice. Both times they were hit and runs. I have somebody's fender that they just left in my fence, tangled in there. I have a small child, I have a dog. Our neighbors, they express the same concerns, and that's just talking about cars driving down there. Obviously, the bigger concern is the fact that it is a dumping ground. Often, we are constantly going out there and cleaning trash. And the trash is not always just your typical kitchen trash. It's mattresses, it's used toilets, it's large items that are hard to get rid of. I was going to let you.
We've had tires, plenty of tires. He's got a photo of a guy that I caught throwing tires out, and I told him to pick them up and get moving. So he was going to throw out probably 8 or 10 tires into the alley, and that's a health concern. There is a half a gallon of oil that someone just decided to drop off of there. We get all sorts of items, cabinets, bookshelves, anything you can think of. And when we're cleaning some of this stuff up, we don't know if there's needles or anything in it. Plus, we've had plenty of people come through. I was sitting outside with my tenant, and we were right next to the fence, and a couple of guys walked up, sat down, and decided to pull out some needles and start to shoot up. I witnessed that. They did it while I was right there. Of course, I ran them off. I didn't call the cops, because what good is that going to do? You know, because they ran off. So those are the kinds of things that are really, really terrible. And when the piles get big enough, we call and talk to the city and say, hey, we got a pile of garbage here that somebody left. They didn't want it in their yard, they wanted it in my yard. So, but even when the city comes to clean up, they don't even get it all. There was a pile recently, and the city came and cleaned it up, but they left a tire and a couple other things. So it's not getting cleaned up. It's not being taken care of.
With your permission, can I just walk by and just show you a couple of the photos really quick?
It'd be better if we put it on the TV, though.
Can you?
So when we have new information introduced at planning commission meetings that's electronic in nature, it needs to be provided to the commission as well. So if you could email those photos.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's okay for you to show these to the commission right now. Yeah, but all of the dialogue needs to be on the microphone, so if you're going to talk while you're walking around, we need to give you the handheld.
We can put it up on the TV. Do we have a plug-in?
I would need a USB-C.
Pass your phone down.
That's a Thunderbolt. Just as a really quick, I'll just show 2 pictures. The first picture will show the state of my fence in regards to the alley, and the second one will just kind of show an example of one of the potholes. And that way, you kind of have an idea of what I'm showing really quick. Thank you. So just in conclusion, we're talking about a lot of overgrowth, a lot of dumping, a poor maintained streets, and what we're seeing is a lot of nefarious activity that's happening that's not always the easiest to report in the middle of the night. So both in terms of just a public safety is kind of our main concern. Like I said, we're not getting the property, so we understand that that's not our motivation here. If you decide not to, if you give a negative recommendation, my question then would be, would there be any idea or planning on what are we going to do to maintain this property, to make it so that this is not an issue, as that is our main concern. The other thing I wanted to address with the dead end that he spoke of, there are 2 alleys, one of them that perpendicular to it, that is actually, that is part of it. It's a very short stretch. Our next plan is to shut that one down too. It is a smaller one. I don't think we'll have as much of a problem with that. It's not used by any city vehicles. It's narrower, but still used for a lot of foot traffic for the same things that Clint described. And as for the alley that continues, where Mead Avenue continues, it would dead end the alley, but there would be an easy turnoff on, is it Jeremy Street?
Yeah, Jeremy Street.
So it wouldn't be a dead end. It would just break off and you could easily go around it. So it's not like you'd be up a stream without a paddle kind of thing. Was there any questions that you guys had for us that we could address?
Yeah. Okay, so suppose that we approve of this street vacation. who will manage the street and what do you expect to physically happen there?
As David explained, it is David, right? Oh, thank you. I don't want to be saying his name wrong. It would be going to all the owners north of that.
And have they agreed to take it over and maintain it?
Yes. So when I talked to him, I described initially that it would either go mix between us or that we would become owners. And we've even told them that we are happy to help. Mostly the first thing we want to do is just get a physical barrier to close it off. That's what we want first and foremost. And then it'll obviously be up to them of how they want to maintain it, just as they would the rest of their property.
So you don't have really any plan or agreement with them about maintaining it? You just have their signatures that it's okay to close it off?
Signatures to close it off, yes.
Right.
That was what the signature was for. The planning is obviously more informal in terms of we want it closed off. What you want to do with your section is up to you, but we will help make sure that it is safe and blocked off properly.
So if it's blocked off, it would be blocked off to vehicles, correct? I mean, you would
Correct.
still
Correct.
walk through there or whatever. So,
No, we want a fence, so you'd have to jump over it.
I see.
That would make, because we have to police it, literally. Every time you see something, you can't always call the police, they're 5 minutes away. We have to take care of it as citizens. And it would make it a lot easier for us to police it. You know, every time we go out there and somebody's throwing out garbage, if you're standing in the middle of the road, they decide to run you over, they can. You know, it would make it a lot easier for us to do our jobs as good neighbors to keep it clean, to just get a fence up so no one can go down there. And then if someone does jump the fence, we have the right to say, hey, you need to leave. This is trespassing.
But
That's what we need.
But yes, in short, it's a fence to block it off from both foot traffic and vehicle traffic.
And we're also open to shutting it off and just having city access.
If they wanted that, as long as it would be blocked off, it doesn't have to go to us necessarily, just that we can say no random people outside of, authorized city personnel or however you want to legislate that, but we're open to that, of course.
So, because it seems like one of the challenges is that you guys don't own the property that the alley gets vacated from. And so you need other people then to solve, like I totally hear you, other people to solve the problem of actually stepping in to block it off or extend their lawns or do whatever it is when it becomes someone else's property.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a community of our 7 homes decision that we all went into. And the one person that didn't sign it was because they were a renter and the owner lives out of country. But the renters also were very much on the same page of, we also want to get this rid of, we've seen this, we've had people throw over stuff into our yard.
And you have approval or intent or money that the properties on the north and south end of that are going to make moves to actually try to fence off their portion of it? Or?
Well, we didn't really
Intent.
know.
I would say yes. Intent with the two people. So if you're talking about just the end, very much so they have intent of closing that off. And we've offered our services of saying, let us know how we can help.
Yeah.
And they've expressed interest in that as well.
But we really had no idea exactly. I mean, we've never closed down an alley before. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen with it. So
Because we didn't understand the plats, so we didn't know that
Yeah.
we'd be getting nothing. We thought it would be more of a half-half situation, and we knew we could at least, if we could deal with half, then we can make sure that cars can't get down.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is the way it is changes nothing in terms of our community agreement.
Now, if they were willing to, split the property, then that would make it a lot easier for us to take care of our part. It would make it a lot easier.
But it's up to them.
It
Yes,
is extremely
absolutely up to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
So we went over there today, and I'm looking here at the map as well, but so if I'm understanding this right, there is an alley kind of on the back end of both of your homes, right?
Yes.
That runs down.
The one that I refer to, yes, that is perpendicular to it.
And that creates a dead-end alley there, which I feel like may be an even better place for people to go shoot drugs.
As I've said, our intent is as soon as we get this one, we're going to close that one next. I've already have half the signatures, and I've talked to most of the neighbors. I just have to talk to a few more to get that, and it'll be the same thing. We want to close that off everyone I've talked to so far doesn't want it there. We don't like that we have that problem that you just expressed, so that we can physically close that off with a barrier and stop that problem right there. And it's not like we see any, I've seen probably the time I've lived there, maybe 2 or 3 cars. It's more narrow than Meade Avenue is. It's not really meant for vehicles to go down. That one's more of a foot traffic issue, but I mean, you're right. We have that problem, and that's exactly why we want to get that one closed down.
The
as soon
only
as
thing that I
possible.
would say about that particular part, though, is there is not the overgrowth right there. So
As
if
bad.
we cut down the alley, there's really almost none, actually. There's almost no overgrowth. You can see down that all the way to the end. If you look from one end of Meade to the other, you can't even hardly see the other side. There's that much overgrowth. I wish we could put up the pictures. I had them all commented. There's spots where people stash stuff. There's a couple of spots where people, decide to use it as a bathroom. There's that much cover that's where they go to do it. There's no cover where that would dead end because it's my property and his property, and then it would be another fence. There's nowhere for people to stop and go, oh, look, I can hide in this bush and do drugs. Really, the pictures, we really need them.
I would have,
No,
and
I mean,
I will
the
send them
staff
in.
staff made good pictures, and we went over there. I think we're pretty familiar.
Those
with how
pictures
it
did
looks.
not cover, those did not show enough detail.
And I would've-
did go see it today.
We saw it. I think we're pretty familiar with how it looks.
And I would have applied for both of them to do simultaneously because I thought that would have been easier, but they told me they had to be separate, and so I just figured I'd do one at a time because 2 applications is expensive.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, have you stepped back, and we'll open the public hearing. So this is the opportunity for people from the public to speak. I have a card here from Mark Mason. Oh, just 1 second. Is there anybody from the community council here?
No, there's not, but they did provide a recommendation in support of this action, which was
thank
in
you.
your staff report.
All right, Mr. Mason. Come up and say your name into the microphone for us.
My name is Mark Mason. I'm one of the co-owners of 815 Fayette. So the lone non-opinion, we were never approached as there is a renter there. Likely, they didn't know how to reach us. So I live locally. We own it 3 ways. The other 2 co-owners are out of state. Really, my concern is really the plan of action. So we have other properties that are also adjacent to alleys, so we're very familiar with this type of challenge of nefarious activity, drug activity. We've had to throw people out of people that camped in our garage, people that went behind our garage and camped out, people that went into storage sheds and camped out. So we're very sensitive and we're support of doing something. My biggest concern is without a full plan of fencing it, regulating it, preventing anybody from actually getting in there, the problem actually could become worse. So, as an example, our property is adjacent to the very edge of that. Our garage covers half of the rear of our property, which means if the property line moves back, even if I put a fence up, we have a hidden cove behind the garage that is now 10 feet deep, out of sight, out of visibility from our direct access. Nobody is going to scare anybody away with a car driving past. Nobody's going to walk by and scare somebody back. And we've seen those that are into derelict activity not really care. Looking for a place that's secluded and shaded behind my garage all of a sudden becomes an invitation without some other method to control that. So my concern is, what is the plan to solve for that? Is it city is going to provide funds because we're taking over the maintenance of an alley that the city previously had responsibility for? Is there a stipend to take that over? Or is it pure homeowner responsibility to solve the vagrancy issue?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this item. Come up and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Greg Bailey. I own 837 West Fayette. You know, the alleyway has caused the tenants that rent from me problems, people knocking on their doors, stealing things, you know, just jumping what is a small brick fence. I have 3 brick garages on the side that have to be reinforced to keep the transits from kicking the windows or the doors out of them. So, you know, I'm all for closing it down and then letting the neighborhood patrol it themselves. I mean, you know, if it's our property, then we can be a little more aggressive to those that are using it as a living space or a drug dealing space or whatever they do with it. But
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and bring David and the applicant back up. Questions from
David,
Commission?
is there any utilities in this section of roadway at all?
No, it was routed to public utilities. They had no issues with the closure, vacation of the alleyway.
So no private provisions either, there's no rights of way or any easements?
There may be some easements that are present, and those would be retained even if the property was conveyed.
Thank you.
So with closing an alley like this, then it that literally means that the property will no longer be owned by the city, or is that a second process?
No. There's 2 kind of simultaneous properties. You could close an alley and not vacate it, which would mean the alley's closed, but the city retains ownership of the underlying property. But typically, you would vacate it, meaning that it goes away and the property is transferred to the adjacent owners. Probably a ways back, we had an alley that we were working on a vacation by the Lincoln Elementary School, kind of here in Central City. And that was an example of an alley that had been closed by the city in the early 80s, I believe, and then not vacated. So that in itself presented a problem because when it wasn't easily accessible, it really didn't get maintained at all, so.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And again, we don't care which way that goes, as long as it gets closed.
Dave, is there any issue with the applicants not being the ones that have any right to the property that's going to be vacated? I mean, part of the discussion here is whether or not it's going to be that's going to solve the problem. And it's going to be up to other people who aren't the applicant to solve the problem. So is it improper that the applicant is not the one that the property would be conveyed to?
No, not necessarily. They are adjacent to the alley, so they are well within their rights to file that petition. It's more of a court case law matter of how that property is ultimately, the disposition of that property based on which subdivision it came from.
Okay. And then what sort of codes would they have to adhere to with fencing or whatever barriers they put up? I mean, is that problematic, being that this, like the one house here on 800 West sits so far back, and there would be presumably a fence that would be there, that the fence would almost look like it's in the front yard of that house, and like, are there other issues there related to how they're going to close that off?
Not that I can think of. Again, typically it's a real estate transaction that would convey it, and most property owners would want to absorb that into their underlying property, so they would likely extend their fence line.
So it would just be each of those homeowners on Fayette that would.
Or
extend
they
it into
could
the back.
negotiate with the
Or-
owners to the south if they didn't want that property to somehow
Okay.
split that, or that would be a private transaction.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Being none, we'll let you guys step
Actually,
back.
sorry, I
You
do
got
have more
one more?
questions, yeah.
Okay.
So if they're not able to own this, well, they need to wait until everything is transferred and then they would theoretically purchase to be able to put up a fence, right? They can't just get this vacated and put up a fence because they have no rights to it. So I just.
Correct, but the property owners to the north subsequently, everything would have to go through and the property be transferred till they could fence it as well.
So they would need to still get a guarantee from these owners to the north that that they're going to be, that they want to purchase the property, right? To be able to, you guys need to get permission from the people to purchase that property, and those people, what if they neglect or they don't want to purchase that property that they have access to, or what if they don't want to put up a fence and they want to keep their side?
Well, they wouldn't be purchasing the property from the city, it would be deeded to them from the city.
But there's no money involved in this.
No, not when
given
it's
to them.
adjacent to single-family or to residential uses.
My bad, I thought that
If it
was
was adjacent to a commercial use, that's a different ballgame, but
When you say real estate transaction, that to me means money, but.
no. Just a title transfer, kind of.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? All right, if you'll go ahead and step back, we'll take the question up to the commission. Any thoughts? A motion?
So I'm torn because I've seen alleys like this get renovated and be amazing in other cities, and I think the potential for that is there. I personally have an alley behind my house, and even though I don't use it, I like to know that there's that access there if I need it in the future. But at the same time, I feel like the city's policy is not to maintain these alleys, so how can they expect anybody to keep them open and just publicly available? I think it's kind of a tragedy. I feel like we kind of have to give them this because that's what they want, because the city's not taking care of it.
So I also have an alley behind my house, and I bought my house 20 years ago, and 10 years ago I tore down the garage I had, built a new one with alley access. And I go out and I weed 3 house worth. I sweep at the alley today of all the debris, and I recognize that part of maintaining it is because I want it to function well and look nice, and so I do it. And but I appreciate that I had the option to orient my garage how I ended up doing it. And if that alley had been vacated behind my house at some point, that would have never been an option. And I'm very reticent about vacating city property when there is a public use or a potentially higher public use. And ADUs, when we did a field trip, Nick, what was the project where it was the RDA and all of the garages had to be accessed from the alley?
It's in the Central 9th neighborhood.
Right. So, I guess I'm really more concerned too with future decisions of property owners. ADUs is one of them, but to take away public uses, I totally understand. My alley has almost every one of those same issues brought up. This is definitely not a unique situation. The other parts of the alley where I don't live look horrible because those people don't choose to go out and weed and take care of it the way that I do. But that's their choice. But I deal with stuff dumped there, maybe not to the degree of that, but I definitely that escalates. Homeless people, needles, just all of that stuff. But I guess I just think back of I think that I have a better situation now with the way I was able to orient my garage. I was able to actually get a little bit more yard because I don't have all this concrete back there. But that would have been a choice that I would never have been able to make because an alley was vacated and now this public use has been taken away. Because I didn't do it right away. It took me 10 years to do it. And there are 2 other houses on the street that have been saying they want to do that too. So I struggle with vacating any public property I really like to look at the use. I like to look at the potential uses if they're strong public, but I understand the conundrum of wanting it to be in good repair, but we know the city can't. I mean, the city can't even take care of our main roads, let alone every alley road. So, but I think it can be beneficial to property owners at some point, and it kind of is how you want to look at it and how you value it. And it's a hard one. It's a tough decision, but I definitely feel like I would have lost a lot of opportunity as a property owner to do things on my property and to access it if I hadn't had the alley. And, so that's all I have.
Nick, I have a question. Does the city have a process for gating alleys and providing keys to just the adjacent property owners?
Not really. And the reason being is that we would have to, the city would have to have some expense involved with gating and maintaining those gates.
If the property owners provided the funds and put in the gates, I mean, if they approach the city with that plan.
We have had some alleys in business districts and commercial areas do that, where we've agreed to it, but they've been required, and the city's required them to provide them with the city with keys,
Right.
and things like that. But I don't know of a situation where that's happened in a residential setting like this.
Because I'm entirely sympathetic to the issues that they're raising. I mean, when I lived in Baltimore, we had the exact same problem, and we had a pedestrian alley behind our row house, but we gated it, and all of the neighbors had a key and could get back there, but nobody else could, and it worked. So I would just encourage the city to think about more creative options if the city's policy is not to maintain the alleys, and give residents some opportunities to take ownership of it without taking title.
We can certainly pass that on to the city council. I know they've battled and debated how to deal with alleys for a very long time. So, I think they would probably be at least open to considering various options.
I'm also concerned about the issue that was brought up about this not having a real plan of what to do with this property, and I am in complete agreement that it may actually be worse without that kind of commitment on the part of the northern property owners to take it over, to maintain it, plant it, build the fences, whatever. That commitment is not there now, and maybe if it were, that would be different. But I kind of agree with everyone else that we lose an opportunity when we close an alley, and it would be great if in a temporary situation it could be closed, so the residents would have control over it, but not vacated, so that in the future we could all benefit, the city could benefit from having that particular alley there. I mean, people are building alleys now in new subdivisions because they provide so much opportunity for, to make the front of the home better. And so that you can put your driveways and your parking back there and your ADUs and your trash collection and everything else. So they have very strong uses, such strong uses that people want them. So I think that this is, it would be a great solution to have a temporary solution.
Well, I think the question is, do we vacate this for them?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Sarah.
Based on the findings and analysis, maybe I'm not. Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony, and discussion at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission transmit a negative recommendation to the City Council for the Mead Avenue Alley vacation, file PLNP CM 2018-00666 for the following, or for the reasons listed in the staff report.
And a second. Brenda seconds. Okay, we'll take a vote. We'll start, Clark.
I'm going to vote yes, but I also just want to comment that I think that, so there's actually 4 different reasons that this applicant could claim, and they're claiming public safety. I don't know that they're making a substantial case for that. I think a community purpose might be a much better option. Speaking to your solution, maybe getting some fences in there and making it a community park or something, and that's actually one of the reasons they can use. So yeah, I'll vote yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Weston?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 2, the zoning map amendment at approximately 2200 West. We have Kelsey.
Okay. This is a request to amend the zoning map of the property located at 2058 North, 2200 West, from the existing AG2, which is an agricultural district, to M1, which is light manufacturing. The property owner is seeking to amend the property to implement the future land use designations noted in the applicable master plan and to increase the economic viability of the property. M1 zoning does align with the future anticipated use of the property. Right. The property is approximately 2.65 acres in size and abuts AG2 zoning to the east and partially on the west. The property is located to the north and the directly west are currently zone BP, which is a business park. The properties located to the south are located in the M1. The North Point Small Area Plan was adopted in 2000 and includes the subject property. The plan shows the future land use of this area as business park, which was consistent with the zoning put in place during the citywide zoning amendment in '95. While the North Point plan identifies the area as business park, it also states that that BP should be amended to allow retail and service type businesses that would support the employee base in the area. It is staff's opinion that the M1 zoning district is in line with the future land use map within the North Point Small Area Plan. The 2017 amendment, which is described in your staff report, incorporated the addition of buffer yards to the M1 for properties adjacent to the AG2 and AG5. These mitigation measures were adopted to ensure adequate buffering between future commercial developments along 2200 West and the remaining agricultural zoning and uses. The proposed M1 zoning district would provide the required buffer yards due to the proximity of the AG2 zone. So one verbal comment was received via phone. This was after the staff report was published. The comment was generally in relation to the amendments across 2200 West and the loss of the AG2 zone properties. The property owner did express that she worked closely with Wayne, who processed the previous amendment, to adopt those buffer yards to protect the existing agricultural uses. And in summary, the proposed map amendment meets the adopted standards, and therefore staff recommends the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. Happy to answer any questions.
Is that in-holding person, that isn't the owner of the
House?
or the house is there?
Oh, yeah, it's not the owner.
It's not the owner, okay.
No, so it's an odd property, but it is U-shaped, so that the house and the garage will remain in the AG2.
Okay, and the comment came from the neighbor adjacent to the east?
Yes, to the east.
Okay.
Here.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Any questions from the Planning Commission?
I should know that this is one of 5 remaining AG properties on 2200 West, so they are slowly coming into M1.
So Kelsey, with you talking about this buffer, Is that part of, and I might have missed it in reading this one, but is that part of, is it the whole periphery? Since, well, they have the street on one, but they have agricultural on the other adjacent to the south, right?
Correct. And so it is the required landscaped yards, and the buffer increases for every height above 30 feet.
So that would really come into play when they came with a project they wanted to build, but right now it's just that it exists.
Correct.
And it would just keep increasing if they got up. In an M1 zone, how high could they go?
65 feet.
And so what would the buffer then be if they went 65? Math on demand, Kelsey. I don't do it. So I asked you.
So that's 15 feet. It would be a 15-foot setback and then 35 feet of additional height. So it would be a 50-foot setback. Yeah.
50 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so excellent.
Sorry.
Okay. And that
Yeah.
would just be in relation to the AG land to the south?
Where it abuts the AG, correct.
Okay. All right, 50 foot setback. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, this little carved out area as well, it does abut the AG here as well. And so, I mean, they'll have a substantial buffer if they go over 30 feet in height. Mm-hmm. You have a question?
Restrictions on the airport?
There are some restrictions on the airport overlay, but they're generally in regards to noise. I think this is in the A and the B zone for the airport overlay. So there will be some building permit requirements, but and it limits height, but the 65 feet, I believe, is within that.
Anyone else? Is the applicant here?
Should be.
He is. Okay, we'll bring up the applicant. And please state your name for the record into the microphone, and you have 10 minutes.
My name's Nick Smith.
Sean Johnson.
And we are the applicant's representative for this particular property. As Kelsey was saying, we're trying to get this amended so that we can have possible different land uses that the owner's debating still at this point, what those might be. And we're looking forward to see how the overlay for the
port
overlay turns out as well. That might affect some of the opportunity for different things as well in the area. But currently, yeah, we're just hoping that this makes sense with every other piece of the M1 that's surrounding the property currently. We have been in contact with both property owners in the AG zones, both to the east and to the west, and they're both, have not had any substantial issues other than making sure that the buffer meets their criteria.
Yep. One thing that I want to stress, our initial application had a CG zone in it because we would like to play with the possibility of having a indoor storage unit, which in M1 that's not allowed, but with the port overlay that does make it allowed. That is why we were okay with changing from our CG request to our M1 request, which also fits in with what the city wants.
Okay, any questions for the applicants? No? Why don't you step back and we'll open the public hearing. So, do we have anyone from the community council? I didn't get any cards, so is there anyone who wants to speak on this item? Going once, going twice? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and have the applicant and Kelsey come back up.
So Kelsey, I guess this is an interesting first step into this inland port overlay.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going for an M1 zoning, but the overlay will allow other things, right? That's what he said. So can you clarify?
I would be happy to clarify. So they did come in with a CG request, and staff informed them that CG would not be supported in this area. It's been mapped for M1.
According to the master plan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the previous amendment, which was processed in 2017, also mapped the BP to M1, which was further south on 2200 West. And so CG wouldn't be supported. We took a look at the land use for CG, and it does allow self-storage units, and M1 didn't allow self-storage units, and so that was incorporated in the inland port overlay. And so the overlay would allow for self-storage units.
What other things would the overlay allow for that aren't allowed in M1?
Due to the overlay, we made that change because we couldn't, it was personal storage wasn't allowed, but then like outdoor commercial storage and things were. And so we viewed that as a fix in the M1 zone because we already had those uses occurring in other parts. So the overlay really just adds additional process for those conditional uses, and then limits kind of bulk storage locations, and put some design or some qualifying provisions around how that occurs, but it doesn't really impact uses of the underlying zone. Those uses are all allowed as indicated, and that's all it really does.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess we don't have any questions. We'll ask you to step back and we'll take it up to the commission. Any discussion? Motion?
Or I'll go for a motion. Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council approve PLNPCM 2018-00657.
A second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hey, let's start with Adrian.
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Weston?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Okay, we move on to item number 3, a special exception for additional height at 780 East, 900 South. Lauren?
Right. So Brett Ross, the property owner, is requesting a special exception for additional building and wall height for a new single-family home to be constructed at this site here at 780 East, 900 South. So buildings with flat roofs in the R2 zoning district where this property is located are allowed up to 20 feet tall. Just for reference, buildings with pitched roofs are allowed up to 28 feet tall. So the applicant is requesting an additional 3 feet of height to accommodate a 3-foot guardrail on top of the roof, which is required by building code to accommodate the proposed rooftop deck space. So generally, the property is located between Liberty Park to the west and then the 9th and 9th commercial node to the east. Here's a photo of the existing home on the lot, which currently sits at 24.3 feet tall. The new house to be constructed will have a similar front yard setback and is also meeting all other zoning regulations besides the height. Again, this property is zoned R2, which allows single and two family structures, but different types of zoning districts, including single family, multifamily, commercial, and commercial are kind of found throughout this general vicinity off of 9th South. One of the standards to gain additional height is that the proposed height of the new home must be in keeping with the development pattern on the block face. So the applicant did submit a survey that shows 4 of the 7 houses on the block face are actually taller than the 23 feet being requested. And then the tallest house on the block face, which you can see here, 768 South 900 East, that sits at 35 feet tall. This is the proposed front elevation. As you can see, the height of the building from established grade to the top of the wall plate measures 20 feet, but the guardrail pushes it to the 23 feet, which is over height. Upon sending out the initial special exception notice, the city received some general concerns regarding the massing of the structure, especially compared to the other pitched roof structures on the block face. They may be similar in height, but they do taper at the top to reduce their perceived massing versus a flat roof structure. The additional height also allows for the roof deck space. And for these reasons, staff is suggesting that the applicant push the guardrail in 2 feet from the roof's edge along its perimeter to reduce the massing from the street level especially, and to also kind of centralize the roof deck activity. And then here's just an image of the west elevation, just so you can get an idea what the side elevations will look like. And again, this measures 23 feet to the top of the guardrail from established grade. So with that, planning staff is recommending approval with the condition that the guardrail be pushed back. We feel that this condition helps to soundly meet special exception standard D, which is regarding compatibility with surrounding development. I did want to point out, as the applicant's roof plan shows, they have tried to centralize the roof activity and keep kind of more green space around the perimeter. So I wanted to show you that plan for your reference. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Questions for Lauren?
So if I have a pitched roof, I can go up to 28 feet, is that what you said?
Yes.
And then if I was gonna, can I put dormers in that roof or anything if I was gonna build into that sort of livable space, or not really in a 28-foot pitched roof?
You can build dormers. You have to meet the wall height requirement, which is 20 feet. And sometimes, depending on the width of the dormers are usually exempt from wall height unless they have a really long, wide dormer, then they'll count. So you can go to 20 feet to the top of the wall plate of the dormer.
I'm just trying to get a sense of like privacy for the neighbors and backyards. If you've got someone that's 20 feet up, then another 5-6 feet standing, you know, could you have other people in a similar house that was built to that height with people who could peer down into your yard? Was there any consideration to that privacy sort of question for neighboring properties, or any discussion around that?
Yeah, and that was a part of the reason for kind of pushing the guardrail in. But I suppose even with a pitched roof structure, you could do some kind of external roof, and that would be allowed under 28 feet. I'm trying to think of a scenario where that would be, like you're saying. But that's kind of the reason, one of the reasons for the condition.
Because I mean, I'll be interested in the public comment and other parts of it. I mean, my question more is less about whether or not 20 versus 23 feet. It's more about the impact on neighboring properties from people hanging out on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Lauren right now?
So the drawings in here that have the 3-foot fence on the, is it a fence? Rail? 3-foot rail on the roof. That is not with the 3-foot setback that you've recommended, or 2-foot?
No, they're showing it at the edge.
At the edge. But then the bird's eye view of the property seems to show, so the green, well, I guess it depends on which one you're looking at. Is that the lawn, or is that green space on the roof?
That's green space. That's their roof plan. The
Okay.
one up on the screen here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's their roof plan. So that would be on the roof. So they did, as I mentioned, try to kind of centralize.
I gotcha. So, but their plan with the fence around the outside of it, they would still be able to walk in that green area with their plan without your recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, step back. Is the applicant here? Come on up, state your name for the record. You have 10 minutes.
Well, I won't need to. Hopefully. My name's Brett Ross, and I'm the applicant. I just want to build a home that's nice in the area. I've lived in other cities, and I've lived in LA, I lived in New York City, and I appreciate the value of what roof access can be, actually. And I think Salt Lake City is a beautiful city. I think just the ability of that small lot that that home is on to maybe use that access on the roof would be very, very beneficial for us. So as Lauren said, we did try to put the activity on the roof towards the center of the roof, taking into consideration the neighbors and all that kind of stuff. The home to the east of the home does have a dormer window that is quite tall and would even be looking down on the roof, quite honestly. Yeah, right there to the left. So, and the home on the bottom is huge, actually. So if you're viewing my potential house compared to the home on the bottom, it will be very small, even with 3-foot addition to the guardrail. Yeah, that's what I'd like to do.
Any questions from the commission for Mr. Ross?
How does the proposed setback that staff has suggested impact your design?
So it's not ideal. I would prefer that we just be given approval for the guardrail. I've talked with Lauren about this extensively, and if that is the condition to get the approval to have the setback, then we could work with that. I would prefer not to, but I'll say yes if I have to.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you're fine.
The roof plan shows some vegetation, sort of, I guess, in pots, so to speak, that could have a very positive impact on the neighborhood, on the privacy and the neighbors. And some of them, like one of them is a red bud, and I'm concerned that the applicant, that you're paying attention to the roof requirements for this kind of, the load requirements, not because I'm the building inspector, but because if that could have a very positive impact on the neighbor's view into your property, and if they actually can't be built, then that would be a concern, I think, because I would be much more supportive if I knew that stuff was actually going to be possible.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, so plants are heavy.
Yeah. Oh, you mean, is the building architect to the point would it support that kind of structure? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that was taken into consideration when we did that.
Because it's an exceptional, that's an exceptional.
Yeah, we're putting more
heavy.
support on the roof for that very purpose.
Even turf is very heavy. So, okay.
Yeah, the architect is very aware of that, and he has an engineer working with him and all that kind of stuff.
So you have like a hot tub and a hot tub duck and some other things up there. So what is the nature of this? What's the material of the fence? I mean,
Of the guardrail?
Guardrail, sorry.
So I showed it as a guardrail, metal guardrail, but it could be a glass guardrail too. I mean, we're trying to lessen the impact of the height increase. So whether it be glass or metal, guardrail, we thought that would kind of take away from. I don't want to build a lot of structure around it if we don't have to, but have see-through or kind of the metal guardrail you can see through. It would make it much more.
Okay.
It would make it not appear as tall.
I think you're right. The impact would be less if it were more transparent.
It's a beautiful, 9th South is a beautiful street, and it's changing dramatically. I think this home can fit very well into the kind of the future design of that street, and I would love to have roof access, and you're all invited if we get it there. But anyway, that's what I'd like to do.
And I can ask this to staff too. Are there any other roof decks kind of on second levels here? I know there's another modern house that's on 9th South, this little ways down, but I think that's just one floor up.
No,
right?
there's a house 4 houses down towards the commercial district that has a roof deck with a jacuzzi and everything on
That's
top.
on the second floor or the or the first
It has
floor?
2 floors and it's the roof on top, yeah.
You have a second floor
Mhm.
deck.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I will say this, I did go around and talk to my neighbors to see if they had a problem, and no one had a problem when they voiced to me. I guess somebody did have an issue when that they sent alarm, but most of them were very open to the idea and didn't seem to express a concern.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If you'll step back, we'll do the public hearing. So we'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone from the community council here? No one. Is there anyone who wants to speak on this in the audience? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll bring back Lauren and the applicant. See if you have any other questions.
I'll ask one. Lauren, what is the purpose of having the lower height maximum for a flat roof? Is that taking into consideration that flat roofs would be walked upon, or what is the purpose for that?
No, it's similar to wall height because a flat roof, and flat roofs and walls have that same 20-foot height limitation, and it's to limit kind of the height that
Vertical.
would tower over the neighbor. We do have like the provision where if you step back your wall from required setbacks, you can go up taller with your wall height. And that was kind of the idea with the condition. They're stepping it back, they can go taller. Does that answer?
Yeah,
So-
that's exactly what I was
Okay.
asking. Thank you. That's perfect.
It's really, I think, kind of a massing issue,
Yeah.
you know, so that it really takes up less air. It takes up more air,
Yeah.
you know, as
Yeah,
a
no, it
building
makes sense.
than a peaked roof or a hip roof,
Yeah.
particularly much more than a hip roof, if
Yeah.
even smaller.
Else? Okay, well, step back. We'll take it up to the commission.
So for staff, I'm just trying to, I know we had this issue a little bit, there was the restaurant that goes in like 11th East and 13th South, and a number of us were not necessarily supportive of like the rooftop dining sort of thing, but the height or whatever seemed to fit the standards. In this case, at least for me, I mean, I think the height thing is not the problem, it's the privacy of what the neighbors kind of feel. But but the fact that it's flat and people are up there, is that even part of something that could be some of our consideration, or are we just looking at the extra height and how that impacts the surrounding neighborhood? Or we actually look at the use of what that space might do to the other?
Well, it's kind of a little bit of both. I think the question becomes, how much different is it if it were if they somehow did something with a pitched roof to do something similar? And, you know, I think Lauren explained that, you know, yeah, that you could have essentially a third, kind of a half story of livable space in a pitched roof at 28 feet. And you can have a series of dormers as long as they're not more than 10 feet wide. You could have 3 or 4 dormers along the length of the house, each with big windows in them and everything else. So it's a very similar impact. You know, to me, I think to the ordinance, it really comes down to that massing, because I think the privacy issues would be the same if it were, could potentially be the same if it were built without a special exception.
From a privacy standpoint. Because it looks very cool, and I'm sure it'll be used. I mean, it looks like a really great space. I mean,
Lauren, who was the public comment from? Do you know?
A surrounding neighbor.
It wasn't like, and was it an immediate, somebody who would be impacted by what Matt's talking about?
Yeah,
or
an abutting neighbor.
It wasn't a budding neighbor.
Anything else? Somebody ready to make a motion?
Oh, I don't have a motion sheet to this in my Dropbox. Did anybody else get one?
Oh.
And probably piece it
apologize.
together
I
from the
printed-
recommendation.
Lauren, I think you actually have on the screen, you had a slide, I think, that had
I think you put it in the first
Yeah.
paragraph of the staff report.
So,
is what
I
she
think-
did.
With the exception of the part of this planning staff's recommendation, you can use the wording up there if somebody wanted to, if that's the direction you're leaning.
Sorry about that.
We need our script, is what we're saying.
I'm not attempting to
script,
piece
too.
the motion together.
I'll make a motion. So, okay, based on the findings listed in the staff report, it is the planning staff's excuse me.
I move that.
Excuse me?
I-
I move
I move
that
that.
we allow the additional height with one consideration that the guardrail must be installed at least 2 feet back from the roof's edge around its perimeter.
Okay, a second?
Good enough. Probably so.
You don't need the PLN CP.
Yeah, and that's it.
It's not mandatory. We prefer that, but it doesn't.
PLN PCM 2018-00524.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
I second.
Adrian seconds. Okay, we'll take a vote. Adrian,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Amy. Oh, Matt, sorry.
Really invisible.
Struggling with it. I'm the only one here.
You came in late.
I'm a no.
It breaks my heart to see us lose these old houses, but I'm certainly not going to penalize you for a guardrail from that. So I'd vote yes.
Weston,
I'm torn. It's a cool house. The project is cool, and I think it would be a great place to live. I'm worried about the privacy of the neighbors, as Matt is, and I think I'd probably be more interested in looking at that further. So for right now, I'm going to be a no.
Sarah,
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the motion passes. Thank you.
I mean, yes.
A hot tub, so the planning commission hot tub.
Okay.
I'm going to have some concerns about that.
You can come too, Paul.
Oh, no.
Well, then party on.
No attorneys.
It has to be recorded, though, because it's a,
That's right, it
it's
would
a
have to be
public, it's a
recorded.
public meeting.
We're deteriorating.
Let's move on to item 4, the RR Development Plan Development. And we get John.
I don't have anything funny to start with, so I'll just say thanks for having me here. This is a planned development request at approximately 205 North Redwood Road to construct a 299-unit multifamily residential development on about 2.73 acres. You look at the map on the right, the subject property is outlined in red. It's located on the west side of Redwood Road, just north of North Temple Boulevard, with easy access to 2 track stations, one on each side of Redwood Road. The property is currently vacant except for a small parking area that appears to be long abandoned. The surrounding uses consist of mostly recently constructed apartment buildings and a suburban-style kind of shopping center to the south. The area is growing rapidly. We've had several hundred units been built in the last few years, including some by the developers here. The project should be compatible because it's very similar to the uses there with existing surrounding uses and the future uses that are advocated for in the North Temple Boulevard Master Plan. The project is located in the TSA zoning district. It is a permitted use. The project has frontage on 3 roads, so it has frontage on Redwood Road on the east, Gertie Avenue on the south, and Harold Street in the west, which I'm sure you guys loved reading those names over and over and over again in the staff report because I enjoyed typing them over and over and over again. But it creates a pretty unique development situation.
At one time, these streets were actually part of a single-family residential neighborhood, but as time has passed, these homes have disappeared, and commercial developments have actually came and disappeared as well. So it should be noted that the project did receive the required number of points during its TSA review to be reviewed administratively. So they're not here for that sort of approval, but the project is being reviewed as a plan development as the applicant has requested 3 modifications of the zoning ordinance. So, and these requests are really due to the property having frontage on 3 streets. So the first would be to allow for parking in the required corner side yard setback. Second, to allow a building along Harold Street that does not meet the maximum front yard setback, or yes. And then the west frontage along Harold Street would not meet some required design standards. So I kind of want to discuss the project as a whole, and then I will go back and circle back and talk about the requested modifications and how they relate to the complete design. So if we go to the next slide, we're looking at the site plan here. Redwood Road is at the bottom of the page, Gertie on the left, and Harold on the top. It's not shown here, but Harold Street actually only extends for approximately 125 feet before it then connects to a private gated drive which accesses the adjacent apartment development. Access into this proposed development would come from Gertie Avenue and from a private drive on the north side which connects to Redwood Road. So in here, the shaded areas are the actual outline of the proposed structures. Much of the structures will actually cover the parking areas below, which will occupy the ground floor. It will be visible from Harold Street, but it will not be visible from Redwood Road or most of Gertie Avenue, as the structures have active ground floor uses that open up onto the street with no openings into the parking area. Because it is visible from Harold Street, staff has recommended placing conditions on the approval to screen those areas from view. So here's a rendering showing the intersection of Redwood Road and Gertie Avenue. I think the applicants worked hard to really show this corner as a focal point for the project. The building is 5 stories tall, or about 60 feet in height. The building materials consist of glass, hardy board, and brick. There's no stucco on the structure, and the materials and design, everything is consistent on all sides of the structure, including those that are rear, that aren't necessarily in the public view. I didn't want to go into a lot of detail with the architectural design, the specific details, because the applicants have they prepared presentations, so I'll let them get into that. Along Gertie Avenue and Redwood Road, the project meets all design standards for the TSA zone. It's along Harold Street is where the issues begin, and that leads us to our next slide. So if, as mentioned, the plan development modification requests to the project are located on the southwest corner of the project along Harold Street. So if you look on the left image, you can see Harold image, it's outlined in red, extends 125 feet and then becomes a private drive. You can also show that it's basically located in the middle of what's now currently a parking lot for a shopping center.
Don, can I just interrupt you right there?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious, related to the site drawing you just had, how far does Harold Street then, the 125, go to what that previous drawing?
So
I can get an idea of that one, how much of those
it's
parking
about,
is.
So this is about where Harold Street actually ends.
So that dotted line is like the gate.
That is, no, that's just a width of the street.
Okay.
But it ends about right here. You can see where this kind of starts to angle down a little bit.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand, a reference of how much of
Sure.
this was beyond
Yes.
this private
That's not
gate.
what we look, that's not where the gate is to the private.
No, this is not the gate. What I'm saying, the gate is down much further. I'm just saying this is where the public street ends.
Okay.
And then where you can see there's parking along here, this is now a parking lot, and this is a private drive.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted a reference of then,
Sure.
so the gate is further down, but the public street ends closer up there. I just needed a reference of where that was falling. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Please continue.
Let's go. And then we have the street view down on the right side. I think you can tell it really kind of looks and appears and is utilized as a private drive and not necessarily as a public street. However, technically it remains a public street, and as a public street, it means it needs to meet any zoning standards that reference buildings along a public street. Here's showing what that west elevation could be. This is the private drive or Harold Street here and Gertie Avenue on this side here. As you can see in the image, the building is not located against Harold Street. It is on the Gertie side, but not on Harold. Maximum front yard setback requires 50% of the building facade to be no more than 10 feet away from the property line. So that would be the first proposed modification. It's currently, the building is proposed at 89 feet from Harold Street. The area between the building facade and Harold Street is proposed as landscaping and surface parking. Surface parking is not allowed in the required corner side yard areas, so that makes that the second requested modification. And the third is that the ground floor along Harold Street does not meet the required design standards such as glass, entrances, and exterior building materials for a ground floor because it's actually open to the ground floor parking area to provide access and to allow for ventilation. I think it is muted because it is 90 feet away and there is landscaping things in between, but zoning still, it's facing that street and is technically a requirement. I do think that it should be noted that the development does provide activated spaces to over 600 linear feet of Redwood Road and Gertie Avenue. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind. I still think that it's important that that portion of Harold Street is activated and that the surface parking areas should be screened. We've worked with the applicant and they've come up with proposing a community open space to activate the area. It would have landscaping and seating, art and community garden plots, which can be seen here in this slide. They're also looking at working with the opposite side of the street to bring in and install the same type of landscaping to kind of create kind of a cohesive entryway. This area is detailed here in the next slide. The North Temple Boulevard Master Plan is very supportive of high-density development in this area. It does advocate for open space as well. The plan does not call for paving over and constructing buildings over every square inch of this neighborhood, and we would support helping this become a livable and a walkable neighborhood. Staff believes the open space does help the project to meet the intent of the zoning ordinance, the master plan. I also think it's very important that the parking areas are screened, which is why staff has added a condition that surface parking areas must be at least 8 feet from the property line and be screened with hedge or wall. They are proposed that way along Harold Street, but I want to make sure that that's wrapped around on that Gertie Avenue to try and hide that surface parking area. The project has really received no feedback from the community, despite sending an early engagement mailer to neighbors, posting a sign, and hosting an open house on site. So at this point, staff is recommending approval with conditions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. As I mentioned, the applicants are here and they are prepared to make a presentation as well.
What's the distance to the closest track stop?
So when we get down to North Temple, it's basically a block and a half in each direction.
So almost.
So probably between, I think it's like
Sounds
700
wild.
or 800 feet on either direction from Redwood Road.
Yeah, it's about a half-mile walk to the.
Not right on a tracks line.
No,
I mean,
it's
barely
tonight.
within one of those.
If I remember right, it's
circle
been
nodes, right?
a long time since we actually evaluated distances there, but
yeah.
I think it was about a half mile from that intersection
I
of
think it's barely within a TSA.
Gertie and
They're right in the middle
Redwood.
between the two of them, but
Yeah, it's a walk.
Anything else right now? Okay, we'll bring the applicant up. Thank you. Okay, state your name for the record, and you have 10 minutes.
Great.
What's that? No, that this is the right one, is what I'm concerned about.
Hi, I'm Blake Henderson. I am the applicant.
Oh, you are right, I apologize.
And I'm Eric Jones. I'm the architect for the project.
So thank you for your time tonight. Just like to say that, as mentioned by John, we have been developing in the area since 2014. We were the first developer to break ground with multifamily on North Temple Corridor in 20-plus years. We are very excited about the area. We appreciate and agree with the zoning. We think it is a benefit to the city and to what we do. So we are excited to the continued progress, positive progress in the area. And what I'd like to say as an owner and developer, creating an inviting space and a place where people can congregate and who feel welcome to be around the area, be around the buildings, and welcome into the buildings is very important to me as, again, as an owner and developer. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to my colleague Eric, who is the expert in in design, site plan, facade, and structure.
Great, sure. I don't want to take too much time. I know these meetings can drag on a bit. So I will try to be brief here, but there's just a few items I'd like to address and just point out in our design process. We were very cognizant of the transit station area development score review process, and really made a strong effort to meet the goals of the city in the design of the project. So we met it with the density of the use. This project has approximately 300 units added, which is about 100 units an acre. We are redeveloping non-conforming uses. We have 360-degree architecture. We didn't want to cheapen the rear of the building, if you will. Because it's a corner building, we wanted to respond to that on the corner of Redwood, have a lot of eyes on the street and public spaces with the project. We are utilizing some of the rooftop design use space for the tenants of the building with a rooftop plaza, and there is the access to transit. And then our parking ratio is just under one stall per unit. So with those, we got a score out of a required score of 125. One of the buildings scored a 138, and the other a 150. So we tried to supersede the requirements of the city in that way with our building design. That being said, the reason why we're in front of you today is because of the additional 125-foot street on the west. So this is the rendering that he showed earlier about our goals for that area. And so along Harold Street, a strict application of the code would require a building be built right directly against that roadway. We don't believe that's the best solution in this scenario. Because there are so many residential units in the area, we thought it would be more beneficial to have more of a community hub in that area. So we created a space as the community members travel through the space, walking, biking, whatever the case may be. There's a space for interaction, a space for some public gathering at that space. And so we've provided a 125-foot linear park where we had that space with different amenities at that park. Just to, I don't know if you mentioned this, but with this new building, there will be a total of approximately 800 units surrounding this area. And so we thought it was important that they had a place to interact and to meet there. Typically impromptu is my guess, but and then wow, that's a little small. I don't know how to use this thing. So there's also a plan there. I'm not a Mac guy, I apologize. So this is just showing a little bit of what that space is. We have a series of 3 different gathering spaces that would allow for those impromptu gatherings, including built-in benches, public art installations, potential community garden space. We want it to be a very inviting area for the community, a place where they will want to meet. And we really are, with the goal of really meeting that city goal of having that placemaking, that node that brings the community together. And then as part of this too, we see this as part of a larger overall community connectivity in the area by providing pedestrian pathways to the different developments that all combine and go through this community hub out into Gertie Avenue, down to Redwood, and throughout to the adjacent commercial properties and different things. We see this as a positive development moving forward, as depending on what the property to the south develops as. There's been some potential of Harold Street potentially running further to the south through the parcel or whatnot, and we see this as kind of a good location for that more community-centered space to provide that grounding to the community. So that was our goals.
Questions for the applicants?
Yeah, I'm interested in the design details of your park. So one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about is putting a park in the middle of what's essentially a car-oriented area. In other words, there's parking on one side and a street on the other. So that's not normally where we put parks. It's, we usually associate them with a building, and this really isn't associated with a building. And it's also attached to a parking lot. So the main concern that I have, though, is how it addresses the street. And right now, the way this design shows, you have a series of grasses along the street front. And what would be an ideal situation probably would be to move the sidewalk closer to the street and have it so that people, as they sit, can look at the street and the building across the street, rather than sort of be really self-enclosed in little rooms with the park itself. So, I would recommend you look a little bit at the planting plan and the orientation of that park, so that it is a place where a person could sit and comfortably not feel like somebody could sneak up behind them on the street and from the street, so they can watch the street, which is where people tend to want to watch. They don't want to watch a parking lot. So even if there's not that much going on in the street, and putting the sidewalk next to the street would make more stuff going on. So you'd be sort of maximizing all the things you're trying to do here with your park. And then it becomes just a nice streetscape in a sense, rather than a park per se. So so I was just asking about what the height of those grasses is, because I don't know, I'm not familiar with that kind of grass, let's put it that way, which is I'll get it here, Carl Forster grass. Does anybody know how big that is?
Yeah, they'll get.
They can get up to
3 or 4 feet
5, 6
tall.
feet high.
Yeah, and that's why I'm sort of concerned about blocking that off from the street, because then you get a situation where something could be going on in that park without anybody seeing what's going on there.
Yeah, and I think we're open to looking
good.
at other design options
Well,
for
if
that
these were the
area.
little blue grasses or something, I wouldn't worry about it at all. But if it's something that's 5 or 6 feet tall, then somebody sitting in those areas with, grass on one, with tall trees on one side and bushes on one side and grasses on the other, they're kind of in a place where it might be rather dangerous.
Just a comment on that, because it's something that is specific to how I like to see things. We've put those tall grasses in because they are separated and they allow you to see the forest of the trees, if you will. So it's not meant to be a hedge. I don't think anything on there represents a solid wall or hedge, to your point, where you could, somebody could come up from behind you, you can't see through it. So it's spaced, tall grasses that are individual columns. There is light and the ability to pass through them, see through them, and that type of landscape architecture is how we've intended it to be designed.
Yeah, and to address your other comment on the location and configuration of the park, I don't know that park is really the most appropriate term. We really see it more as a kind of a paseo, or more of a place of more movement than a park. Is typically a destination. This is more of an impromptu meeting spot, and somewhere as the residents filter through the property, they would meet to then proceed somewhere else in that way. So.
And I agree with that assessment. I think that actually, if this is what we're getting, instead of having the street front, that perhaps some kind of a pergola or something where you would actually have a little shade it would actually be a place where somebody could comfortably sit, at some point, probably more often than they would in the bright sun. So, I mean, I'm thinking more of it facing the street and having somewhat of a covering, perhaps, so it really is more inviting than the drawing is showing right now. But this is just my only. Right now, I was just going to ask questions, and the question was, how high are the grass? So
absolutely, yeah,
so
and we do. That is some of the intent of some of the trees and other. We do want it to be a very comfortable space,
yeah.
and so I definitely agree with that sentiment for sure.
So why not just make the building larger so that it continues over to Harold and just incorporate more of the parking in sort of the interior of the project? What was their thinking behind that?
There are a few difficulties raised by that. One is the building is limited in width to 200 feet. That's part of the ordinance. And so
which is the same on Redwood Road, right? And you've solved that with the breaking the building up? Is that why you put the
Yes.
break
So
there?
we could do another building on that corner. Would be the way we'd have to address that.
Right.
And that is a possibility. In looking at this site and looking at the surrounding development that's occurred here, we felt it was more beneficial to open this space and create an area of gathering. I think that if it's too enclosed, it would have a dramatically different feel to it, and there wouldn't be that place for community that I think this provides to the project. And so it just made me nervous to go that direction with it. And that's
One comment on that. We, I think it was mentioned that we have activated over 600 feet of Redwood Road and Gertie Street. So we are trying to draw the people in and get that activity there. And to Eric's point, there is, if we don't put this in there, there is really no other outdoor area to congregate, to meet up and to get a little bit of greenery in the area where there are now, or where there will be over 800 different units. So,
And I'm very glad that you've incorporated some greenery, because I do think as we densify and add these large projects, we're going to need more of that. I kind of echo Brenda's concerns. I'm skeptical that it's going to be used as much as you probably would like it to be, because of where it's at. And I don't know that it's a nice feature to have, the greenery. I just don't know that the location really lends itself to a place people are going to really congregate or use, especially since it's kind of on the parking side. Everybody's going to be on the Redwood Road or the Gertie side doing with all the activation that you've done, and I don't know. That's my gut.
I have a question too about the parking. How are you? How do you fit within the parking ratios that are normally allowed for this? Are you over parking, under parking?
No, we are. So we're right under one stall per unit.
Okay.
It's allowed to go as low as
0.5
per unit. It's allowed to go as high as 1.5, if I can remember correctly.
Correct.
So we're right in the middle of the parking allowance.
The reason I'm asking that question is that I would love to see this green area expanded just a little bit, perhaps into that first area of parking, and that you have there. So that, because there's also a stand of trees there, and there's a stand of, and somewhat of a depression where you could have where there's water actually coming in there. So, I mean, if it's possible to actually have a real little pocket park there on the corner, that would be, I think, a lot more acceptable than, and bring the parking in through the side street, bring the interest of the parking through the side street. So if you have a little extra in the parking department, if you could spare the parking, so to speak, having that green space might really offer a tremendous amenity to the whole neighborhood.
So parking is always a question with a project like this, obviously. And how we've approached it is we've really made an effort to try and allow as much flexibility in the parking moving forward as we can, because we've actually designed the building with a higher than typical PT deck to allow for potential future commercial space along Redwood Road. And so the thought is, in the future, when that becomes warranted, we would actually eliminate parking underneath the structure in order to expand that space for commercial. And so we've tried to keep as much parking as we can to allow for that commercial to take its place when it's warranted, and that would further activate the street and we feel be a benefit to the community. At this time, we feel that's a little premature, but we want to allow for that flexibility.
Any other questions for the applicant right now? No? Okay, we'll have you step back and we'll open the
Thank you.
public hearing. Okay, we'll open the public hearing on the RR Development Plan Development. Is there anybody from the Community Council here? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak on this? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. You guys want to come back up? Any more questions, discussion with the staff and the applicant? You're thinking about it, Weston.
Thinking. John, can you talk a little bit more about the public road to the private road? And that'll always be that way, right? There's no way that's ever going to be extended into a public road. I mean, because it is a road. I'm trying to remember.
It is a public road. It is a platted public
but
street.
up to that point, and then
But only to this point, right? I mean, certainly if somebody wanted to in the future dedicate it as a right-of-way, they could do that.
Yeah.
Or they could attempt to go through that process, but I wouldn't foresee it. There probably wouldn't be any good reason to do that. I think if there really was any sort of expansion of that street as that older kind of retail center ages and we know they don't have a long lifespan, certainly I could see that area being, the street maybe going to the south and kind of to grid that area, but probably going north, I wouldn't foresee it.
And who owns it? Who owns the private road? Is it this development? Or is it the one to the north?
The one on the west side.
The one on the west.
Oh, the one on the west side, okay.
So I guess I'm curious. I have very much the same feelings that I don't feel like this green space is going to be utilized. It's basically like, let's go sit out on the parking strip and see what's going on. It doesn't feel like it's big enough for a draw. This seems like just a parking lot to me. So I guess I'm wondering, are you open to expanding the green space so that it actually is something that your residents could be a little bit more defined and more usable, and are you open to that, or is this is the only thing you see working?
It is a challenge, as Eric mentioned. There's a dance between the adequate and needed parking and the space for our residents to congregate. We will not have a successful project if we can't have one spot of parking per unit. We've looked long and hard for other areas on the ground level to create congregation space and outdoor space and green space. Because of the zoning and having the building pushed up to the street, there's no other access or areas to access for public space or for ground level congregation space. So the answer is, I can't, it's, unless we can get creative, and we'll keep looking, but to find a way to keep the one parking per unit, and remember there's 300 units there with, and being developed in the area, many of those units are couples and roommates who have multiple cars. It's a significant challenge right now to bring the density in, build it to the property lines, and park it adequately, and provide the green congregation space that people need. So we're trying to find that balance.
So with the idea that I don't necessarily think this is a congregating space anybody will use, what if for this 125 feet you build out as you should, and you still have all your parking, but it's underground and you get more units, and then after that, you make it open like you have planned. You would still save your parking, you'd meet the code, or you'd meet the ordinance because you'd be building to the street. But you wouldn't have what you're considering an outdoor congregating space.
That's correct. If we were to build up, there would be no place to put an outdoor congregating space. And I'd also like to say, if we were to build another building there, we keep the same amount of parking, but our parking ratio goes down significantly. And I know that's not the biggest concern of the group here.
No, but so we've had other projects that are over the 200 feet, and I have seen other architectural elements instead of an additional building be utilized that break it up visually so that it's still one building, but you have met the intent of that 200-foot line, and so you have some architectural feature that makes it look a little different and breaks it up, but it's not necessarily a third building.
Understood. The breaking up of the building is a concern, but not nearly the concern of adding more units and more building and not being able to have adequate parking for that space. So if we were to build and make the building larger.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying.
So if I understand your comment, do you feel it would be more acceptable to have a building to that corner, even if it's longer than the 200 feet, which would again require presentation and
Yeah, some sort of architectural thing to break it up.
Yeah, then it would be to provide this.
I guess I'm feeling that this is just more of an open surface parking lot, and I don't know that that serves our urban intent of creating an urban environment, and I just am struggling to see that space that you have outlined there as really usable as an outdoor green space for your tenants. I just don't see there's enough there, or that it's large enough or defined enough. It feels like it's just a really well landscaped parking strip and outside of the parking lot. So I'm not necessarily getting the feel that you're accomplishing an outdoor area, and so I'm just grappling with
Yeah,
then. So then should we just meet the ordinance and build out because we really don't want surface parking lots? But I understand the relationship of adding more units to then having to add more parking. But right now, really all I see is that you just want a surface parking lot. And you're going to throw this in there, but it's not really feeling like it's meeting the objective that you're stating to me. So I'm trying to figure out a way of where you would feel comfortable or where you think it's doable that can be expanded, can be better defined, can actually feel like an outdoor usable space. And that's kind of where I'm at, and I don't know. So I'm trying to get a sense of what you're willing to play with or how you can view it so that you can kind of change this relationship to like, I just got a surface parking lot with this little green space, and how can I make this?
Now, when you say outdoor usable space, can you help me understand kind of more what your thoughts are? I mean, that would be helpful.
I think that if you are trying to accomplish an outdoor space where your tenants will congregate, I don't really see that as big enough or well-defined enough. It really feels like a very extremely well-landscaped parking strip. And I don't know that invites anybody out. When we talk about, our outdoor space, they're bigger, there's some other things happening, and so it needs something more than it's just like, hey, we put this on the corner, we hope you go sit out there. And so that's where I'm struggling, because what I really see when I look at this is surface parking lot. I don't really see this.
So I think that when we approached this, I think our approach was a little bit different. We weren't looking at this as a place to congregate and sit on a bench and whatnot. We saw it more as a meeting space where you meet and then you go elsewhere.
I'm wondering, would you be open to it not being where the parking strip is, that it becomes an outdoor space right out of the building, and then you have your parking or something so that it's more connected? So I'm not walking through a surface parking lot to a parking strip where I can just sit and I don't know what I would do there. So make it feel like it's actually connected to the building maybe. Are there options? I guess I'm asking you if you feel like there are options to make that feel like it's actually some an amenity to the building and not just like an adjacent thing we threw out there, so that people aren't having to walk through a surface parking lot.
Yeah, I think that we're open to looking at those options. And that's why I'm trying to figure out kind of what the goals are, because when we put this, we located it where we did in an attempt to activate the street corner, if you will, and then also connect the different developments, not just have it dedicated to our development. But I think,
Just gonna say, what you did on Redwood and Gertie is great, and I am not against not defining Harold Street because it's such a short street. Like, I think I understand that and I get it. I just, what's the most prevalent thing for me here is this is just a parking lot.
yeah, and this would, if I understand the code correctly, this would actually be allowed as is if Harold Street was a private drive and not a public street.
Right, it totally would.
It would
I
be allowed as
understand that.
is.
Oh, I
And
know.
so what our goal here is to provide something that would activate that street more than it currently is, that would create this impromptu, gathering space, but not like a long-term, let's get together as a community type of thing, but like groups saying, oh, let's meet down at the, whatever we call this, I don't have a name for it yet, but let's go meet there, and then they would go elsewhere. But it's a little place where all these residents could come together in small groups and meet. So it's, that was the intent.
And I'd just also like to add comment, because I do appreciate it, the thought of a glorified streetscape or parking strip. I do think that, and we do intend to build it as we show it, meaning with benches, with pathways, with art in there, and with ornamental grasses and trees designed to make it an inviting space. I agree. If it were just a well-manicured place without pathways, without benches, without some elevated planting boxes, it wouldn't be all that attractive. I think if you build it correctly and put the right pieces in there, it does become attractive to people, and they will go and sit. It is a quiet corner. There is restaurants on the south side where people will go and maybe come over here and eat out there. So I disagree somewhat that it's just a nice parking strip with the amenities or the architectural elements that we plan to put into it. And going back to my first comment, we truly, as an owner-developer, want people to congregate. We want it to be inviting. We want people out there. We want energy in and around our building. That is beneficial for us all. So we don't want a dead space that's just not helping anybody. So we do think we're trying to meet the best of both sides of this, trying to meet the zoning requirements as best we can. We like the zoning requirements, but sometimes they handcuff us a little bit, so we're trying to find a way to make it a win-win for both.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I agree with Amy, and I would like to see this expanded so it's instead of having a building come to the street, we have a park come to the street. And that would mean on both sides of the corner. And it doesn't have to take up more than a few parking spaces to really, and maybe even there's ways of making it more of a square so there'd be more parking on, there's trade-offs you could make and maybe only lose, like 7 or 8 spaces. And then you would have the trade-off of actually having a green corner where there's already a stand of trees and so mature trees and so forth. So it would seem to me like that would be, instead of having a building on the corner, you would have a little pocket park on the corner that would offer you a great deal more than 8 parking spaces.
Any other discussion?
I don't know, sure, I'll just ask the one question. Can you shorten the park and then add parking spots on the north end on both sides of the street? No.
Shorten the
We can't,
They're 125
we can't add
linear
parking
feet.
on the Herald side.
Yeah, that's not our property.
That's not our property.
That's private, and that's part of the private street still.
Yes.
Or is it-
No.
or is it still is it
No,
public?
this is in
Well,
the
that's your,
public
that's the
right-of-way.
city's property, up until that red
You could
line.
permit them
this-
to add street parking there.
So you can see where this, kind of, there's this red dashed line, and then it kind of disappears here, but this is where the actual property line is. This, oh, I'm sorry, but this area right here is actually still in the public right-of-way for right now.
On the northwest corner, the city could grant, I mean, there's like 8 parking spots if you count along.
Well, this is actually the southwest corner, but I assume
Sure.
you mean this area.
Yeah, but the
top-
northwest
top
corner, but the
left.
northwest corner of that southwest corner
Okay, yes, like right here.
property. Could you not shorten it?
They can request to put in angled parking from transportation. It would, I mean, it certainly is a process, but they could make that a request.
If you picked up.
So the
somewhere-
thought there is to transfer some parking there, make the park more corner-oriented.
I mean,
And I think you also could pick up a parking space. Drive-through, so you'd have that. I think you would not end up losing that much. Maybe, like I said, maybe 8 spaces.
I mean, would you guys be open to, as long as your
Checking that
parking
out.
was not impacted? The number of stalls that you've got presented?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, no question.
I mean, I'm supportive of the project, and so I'm trying to appease others. Which is fine. I've been the one that's needed to be appeased before. Well, I'm happy to make a motion unless or give this a shot.
Please do.
So for staff, I mean, I kind of want to say, I want to move the project forward is what I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So move the project forward on a condition that that this is tried to achieve, that they shorten the park. But I understand that there's problems because the city has to agree to additional parking and everything else. And if the city decides to be a stickler somewhere in the process, then I think they can continue moving forward with the plans presented. I'm trying to figure out how, it's not really a condition, how I can make a motion that does that, so it doesn't have to come back here either.
Okay.
That staff can approve changes.
A reconfiguration?
Why don't I try this? So based on the information, the staff report, public testimony, and discussion by the planning commission, I move the planning commission approve plan development PLN SUB 2018-00641. In order to comply with the applicable standards, the following conditions applied. The parcels must be consolidated into a single parcel. Surface parking areas must be set back at least 8 feet from the property line. And a final one, that the public space on the southwest corner can be reconfigured, so shortened to less than 125 feet, to accommodate a wider configuration with similar parking requirements that can be approved by staff, whether that condition is met. Does that work, Paul?
I guess broader is specific enough. I mean, you described what you're trying to achieve with broader.
And staff has discretion
Yeah.
over whether that condition was met.
Sure.
Well, I mean, what you're looking for is more of a square and less of a rectangle.
And maintaining their, I think I will say outside of my motion, but I appreciate with this originally I was like, why don't you just extend the building? And, but I appreciate this applicant seems to have explored a lot of different questions, right? The parking question requirement, that you're not exactly really, I mean, you're close to a track stop, but not really. I mean, Redwood Road makes its own challenges for transportation for pedestrian sort of traffic and moving.
Certainly.
And I am not a fan of the really long buildings. And that's been something I've been, and you guys have clearly not, you're not asking for that additional length. I do think the reason the long buildings become a problem is because you end up with a really boring landscape. And it's more about what faces the street and like how if someone is going to walk, how it feels. And so I do think if you're able to make that a lot more square thing, so when you're walking down Gertie, you feel like you walk through less parking lot. That's I think the goal and the intent. Whether or not people use it or not, I don't know. But I mean, I think some may go out there. But the intent is, I think, from my perspective, when someone walks down the street, they don't feel like they walk across a parking lot to get to the next spot, or they're not walking through a bunch of parking lots as they're moving from the apartment complex to tracks. And so I think a more square, I would agree with them, would meet that. But I also, I think you're right with your parking is going to be needed, and it's going to be, you guys have done a balance, so I appreciate that.
So Matt, a point of clarification, is it included in your motion that the park would then extend, it would have to extend from the building on Gertie over to Harold? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, there can be a parking way to get, it doesn't extend from it's on a corner. There can be a parking lot still.
So you still can enter it into the parking lot from Gertie?
This area right here.
Uh-huh. Okay. I think that's fine. I think it's fine to have a driveway off of Gertie. I think they need it for the property to make sense and for the flow of traffic to be, I think that's fine.
I think I agreed with Brenda when she was saying instead of extending the building to the corner, we can extend the park. So I would be more in favor of requiring that be
Well, you can
parked.
substitute or change
If we've
my
got a
motion,
motion
but I've
that
got
we
a
think
motion
is
on the
clear,
floor.
then we
Yeah.
need to have a second before we start having a debate
Okay.
on it.
So
Well,
is
that's
there
why I
a-
was clarifying.
Is there a second for Matt's motion?
I second.
Thank you, Adrian.
I would like a friendly amendment, if we can do it, which is instead of the condition that Matt said about the park, that the park extend from the building to Harold Street with a depth of at least 50 feet, 50 to 60 feet from Gertie Street.
It sounds like a substitute motion almost.
I'm probably a no to that amendment, only because I then feel like if you're walking, you can walk past the driveway, otherwise you're walking past a little park, you're passing a driveway, then past the street, and it does it, I think from a pedestrian standpoint.
But it wrecks the park.
Commissioner Scheer, if I could mention, just the applicant mentioned that they do actually need this circular route around the development for their fire access as well, so they can take this all the way around the development.
Well, yes.
Well, I'm
and
gonna,
Okay,
no.
so-
I'm gonna, someone can offer a substitute motion, but I'm gonna say no. to the
Okay,
amendment.
so we do have a motion and a second. Let's vote on that motion. Matt's motion to reconfigure the,
Or substitute, one of you guys can substitute it, too.
well, no, I mean, that's,
Well,
Someone can't.
If
Phil.
she's going
Yeah.
to make a substitute motion, have
I
them make
didn't.
it.
I made
Okay.
an amendment proposal, which you said no.
which you said no to. So let's take care of the motion on the table.
You just,
I'm gonna pay for that later.
It was
Yeah,
even
yeah, I
a
think-
friendly amendment,
I think
right?
you
It
probably
was
are.
friendly. Okay, let's, Matt's motion to reconfigure this with under staff's supervision. So let's vote on that. Adrian,
Yes.
Brenda,
I'm probably going to regret this, but I'm going to say yes.
I
Matt.
hope you don't.
Yes.
Don't make me regret it.
Amy,
Yeah, and John, just for kind of further intent from me at least, that it just feel more prominent and connected to the building. Doesn't have to be connected to the building, but as you approve it. And don't make me regret this, but I'll vote yes.
Weston,
I don't think the solution is going to cut it, so I'm going to vote no.
Sarah,
I like this project. I actually like that strip. I wish I had a place like that to wait for my Uber driver. I'm voting yes.
That's what it'll be. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but that's what it'll be. It's an Uber station is really what it is.
and Clark.
That's the hope. We want to open
And
some commercial
Clark.
on the main level. We'd like that.
I'm going to vote yes, yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you all.
So there you go.
We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Matt.
we'll make it look right. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do it right. Thank you.
And you guys can come, you're invited to that park too, please. all of you. West, even Weston, no, even Weston.
You're out of the party.
No, Weston's invited. We welcome everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
It's not gonna be that great of a place to hang out anyways.
Ouch. Okay, so our last item this evening is the Exchange Phase 2 Plan Development in CBSDR at approximately 320 East, 400 South. Hi, Amy.
So this is a development by Downtown Salt Lake City Partners. They are representing the property owner, who's Salt Lake City Corporation. They've initiated petitions for a plan development and for conditional building and site design. This project is 2 phases. The commission approved phase 1 with conditions on October 10th, 2018. What's before you this evening is for phase 2 of the request, and it's a development of Building B, which is a 5-story structure with over 2,700 square feet of retail, 126 mixed income units, and 30,000 square feet of office co-working space. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. To help orient you to the site, I'll show some photos of the property. These photos are from 4th South, looking down Blair Street, as well as to the east of the property, looking down the drive approach for the adjacent property to the east. These are from Blair Street. The existing site has a structure on it, as well as some surface parking areas. And then these are some photos of the existing mid-block walkway at 450 South, looking west at the City and County building, and then where it's proposed to extend, keeping the 450 South alignment, looking east, and then a view from Blair Street closer to 500 South, looking north. This is an aerial map as well as a proposed site plan. The development has frontage on 400 South and Blair Street. Retail use is proposed on the ground floor of 400 South as well as Blair Street, and residential lobby and parking are also proposed along Blair Street. The parking would have access off of Blair Street. And the upper floors of the building have residential units and office. The building has a height of approximately 57 feet. Exterior materials include glass, aluminum composite panel, and metal mesh screening. This slide is just to discuss a little bit about what could be developed on the property if they just met the underlying zoning requirements. The project would have to have active ground floor use along 60% of Blair Street frontage for a depth of 25 feet, and the building facade along Blair Street would have to meet all of the design standards related to glazing and provide pedestrian entrances every 40 feet. Any surface parking areas would have to meet landscaping and screening requirements. With the parcel length of approximately 390 feet, more than one building could be constructed on the site with a maximum facade length of 200 feet. If multiple buildings were constructed on the parcel, a 20-foot wide separation between buildings would be required. It's important to note that one of the reasons why the 450 South alignment of the mid-block walkway is important is because it generally follows parcel lines. So it increases the potential to maintain that corridor as those eastern properties are redeveloped and the walkways extended east. It's also important to note that one of the intents of the 200-foot facade length is to break up the blocks, and this particular block is already largely broken up by Blair Street and the mid-block walkway that's proposed to be extended to the east. There's not any parking required with this development. However, minimal parking has been required or has been provided. They are well below the maximum parking requirements. Because of the narrow width of the site, if the development were required to meet all of the parking areas, all of the zoning requirements, the parking area and circulation of the site would need to be modified significantly, and parking spaces would need to be eliminated. The zoning district permits a height up to 90 feet with the potential for additional height of 1 story equal to the average height of other stories in the building. The proposals for a building height of approximately 57 feet. Although the development could be built to a taller height, this site is identified within the East Downtown View Protection Area, so the proposal is consistent with master plan policies to protect view corridors, vistas, and focal points in the downtown area, such as the city and county building. Through the plan development process, the applicant's proposing to modify regulations related to landscaping and screening of surface parking lots in the core area of the TSA zone, and parking lot landscaping requirements in the landscaping chapter, and those relate to perimeter parking lot landscaping as well as an interior parking lot landscaping. And staff has provided some analysis and findings on that request in attachment F of your staff report. And through conditional building and site design, the applicant is requesting modification of some of the design standards. They're requesting modification to the active ground floor use and visual interest requirements. They're requesting modification to ground floor glass. The distance between building entrances, the maximum length of a blank wall, maximum length of a street-facing facade, and a parking structure along the street that's not wrapped in habitable space. All of the requested design modifications relate to the west elevation, which faces Blair Street. A chart outlining the requested design modifications and staff's analysis is located in attachment G of your staff report. The first time the project came before the Planning Commission was for a work session on September 12th. Minutes from that work session, as well as an informal summary that was prepared by staff, is also included in attachment E. Following the work session, the following revisions were made to the proposal. When the project was presented at that time, the applicant was exploring options for a mid-block walkway to the south of the development on an adjacent parcel that's not part of their development site. The development of that would require the police department to vacate or reconfigure their existing parking lot, and that's not something they're willing to agree to at this time. The mid-block walkway has been proposed into the ground level of the parking garage of the building and maintains the 450 south alignment of the walkway. The height of the ceiling above the walkway is approximately 8 feet, and the walkway is approximately 16 feet wide. The interior of the mid-block walkway is open to parking lot and vehicular traffic from the north and south, accessed through parking gates. And although the mid-block walkway is proposed as part of the development, the applicant's requesting that until the property to the east is redeveloped and required to continue the mid-block walkway through the block, they would like to keep the east and west entrances to that walkway closed until that time. And as a condition of approval, a public easement would be recorded for the walkway, and a sign would be posted indicating the times the public may use the walkway, and then a development agreement would also be executed to trigger when that when they would be required to remove those gates once those east properties redevelop. During the work session, there was also some discussion regarding the south elevation of the building and how the improvements to the design of the south facade would help the building be more oriented towards the mid-block walkway, which, as I just discussed, was initially envisioned to the south on an adjacent parcel. The applicant has revised the design of the south elevation to include a mural. With the addition of that mural, they removed the one that was initially proposed, that's shown there on the left. Because the south elevation isn't adjacent to a public street, the design standards aren't applicable to that facade, and they're not requesting any modifications related to it. So as a condition of approval, staff's recommending that they add back into their proposal that previous mural that was proposed to increase the visual activation on that west facade where they're proposing non-active uses and requesting modifications. Staff has provided analysis and findings on the requested modifications as they relate to the intent of the design standards, and finds that with recommended conditions of approval that the modifications meet the intent of the design standards. The recommended conditions of approval mostly relate to screening of parking areas, the gating material for the mid-block walkway, which would essentially become a facade element until the time that that walkway is open, and more refinement on the details for visual interaction and interest along Blair Street. As analyzed in the staff report in attachment I, staff finds the requested modifications to the parking lot landscaping meet the standards of approval, and the proposed development meets several goals and policies of associated master plans. And again, staff is recommending approval with conditions as listed in the staff report. And we do have representatives from the development team here, as well as a representative from Housing and Neighborhood Development, who is the lead for the city on this proposal.
Any questions for Amy right now?
What do you mean by interior parking lot landscaping?
So the interior parking lot landscaping requirements,
You're putting plants inside a parking garage? Is that what we're doing?
so it's these areas that are highlighted in, I guess it's like a pinkish purple up there. So the interior parking lot landscaping requires that 5% of that be landscaped, which they technically meet the 5% because 5% of their land, or of their parking lot area would be 452 square feet, but they're proposing 573. The thing that they're not meeting, not strictly meeting, that's a requirement, is that each landscaped area, so they would technically be required to have like a median type of a thing in there that's a minimum of 120 square feet.
I'm still confused about why we have interior
That's-
landscaping.
That's surface parking. It's outside of the parking structure.
Yeah.
So you can see kind of the edge of that purplish color. It's kind of the edge of what would be the building.
Oh, that is
So
exterior. I see. That's exterior to the building.
Yeah.
So it's not interior. Okay. Okay, thank you. I get it now. I was completely confused about putting plants inside a parking garage. Well, that's what it kind of says,
That's what it
interior
sounded
parking
like.
lot, you know.
I went there
landscaping.
myself.
Okay.
but-
Sorry, go ahead. So-
Anything else for Amy right now? Okay, why don't you step back and we'll bring the applicant up. Welcome back. State your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Chris Parker with Give Group.
I'm Michael Glomboski with the Domain Companies.
Thanks for seeing us again. You guys have seen the project before. Every time I see it, I like it, which is good if you're about to build it. I think for the purposes of the TSA zone, if you were to kind of just close your eyes and imagine a meaningfully mixed-use building that had several different levels of incomes in it, that hid all of its parking, most of which under building actually had a very low parking ratio, and it was able to be developed on a tiny site, or at least tiny width site. I'm really impressed with what the architecture team did here. I should note that this has an excellent place to congregate on the roof with unobstructed mountain views.
Chris,
in case that
can you pull
influences
that
anyone's decision.
Can you pull the microphone really close? Those
Sure
ones
thing.
don't pick up. Thank you.
But no, we're really happy with this. We feel like this definitely meets the overall intent of some of the updates that were done in the TSA zone to make Fourth South and some of our large corridors really meaningfully active and impactful. The principal things, as Amy noted, that we're asking for are with Blair Street, being a mid-block street, and this site only being wide enough for one deck of parking. It really limits our ability to have some of the other things we provided on phase one, wrapping the entire, almost the entire building in active use, and then what we've been able to do on 400 South, wrapping that in completely active use. To mitigate that, we've tried to make an active and inviting corridor to the extent that we could. We've curved the building so that this building really appears in no single orientation to be seen as more than 200 feet. So from this angle, you'd see to the curve and it would be less than 200 feet. If you were to look at it from the People's Way elevation, the most you could see would be less than 200 feet. And if you were to look at this from the 500 South elevation, you would only see less than 200 feet. So as was noted in a prior applicant's proposal, we've really tried to go ahead and mitigate the feeling of a large building. I don't think that will be the experience of this, really from any angle. and really tried to maximize the people's principal experience of this building, which will probably be on 400 South. As to the landscaping requirements toward the back, we didn't want any surface parking lots that were visible from the street. And so to get the parking ratio, which is very low as it is, we went ahead and put that parking all the way back to the back lot. It should be noted that what you're abutting to behind you is a parking lot that actually has a small landscape buffer in most places. So there often is a buffer that exists, even though it's not on our parcel. And then pretty much anything we're touching that doesn't have a landscape buffer is hard concrete on the other side of it, often behind a multi-story parking deck. So this is not going to be an area that's trafficked anytime soon. And to the extent that it would be trafficked ever, it would be required to have a mid-block going through it, which would have its own landscaping requirements. So I don't think that it's unusual to have this be a place that isn't heavily green. I don't know how the plants would survive anyway amongst all of that building.
Yeah, so just to run you through this diagram we put together for Amy, the adjacent bank has their parking median here, which is grass. The lighter green is what we are providing that's outside, again, of our building line, which is here in white. That's the building line. This darker area is out from under the building. This would be the eventual mid-block walk extending through should this parking deck ever go away. There's actually also a parking deck here directly on the property line, which we're buffering ourselves just so these cars can open. And again, we have the police department's parking buffer here where we were trying to work on getting the mid-block to go outside. So, do you guys have specific questions on this issue? Because that's one of them, and then we can maybe run through the deck that I had on the other file.
So I'd like you to talk more about this walkway because I'm not particularly enthralled with it being in the parking lot open to vehicular traffic, and I just would like to hear more about this.
Okay, there's slides in the other file that I can show you that's specific to that. This one was just to talk about the landscaping, so there are specific ones. Basically, this shows that we have this roughly 100 feet that we do have an architectural fence here. It's not like chain link. It's a designed slatted fence that has some movement to it. And that's going to be the buffer at that point. And again, it's us trying to squeeze in parking as much as we can for this use. So to answer your questions, let me go to those slides on this file. Again, to speak to what Chris was speaking to, we basically have 3 different buildings, if you will, where the facade sort of bleeds as you go south on the project, and the building itself goes from a sort of regulated vertical glazing to dancing windows, and the building itself starts to push east. And we can come back to all these if you have questions, so we'll skip forward to the mid-block. So this shows, sorry if this PDF below is bleeding through, but basically where that mid-block is happening is almost the exact extension of the one that comes from this building through the library, in front of the public service building, and through this opening here. We had met with the planning staff on putting it where our existing drive is, behind the building, and we all sort of came to agreement that providing it on this existing access was the sort of path of least resistance. The idea being that we would have a gate on the front and the back, the gate being open when it's open, and then we also would have gates interior to that, so the parking it's sort of barricaded from being able to cross this. Those gates would open when people needed to drive through. Let me fast forward so here's a bigger plan of that. So automated gates would be here and here. There'd be 2 of them. And the way the circulation works is that you would basically circulate through this way, and those people that are parking here would circulate across only at this one point.
Where's the entrance and exit for the parking around that mid-block walkway, or is the mid-block walkway also their primary entrance and exit?
It's all coming right across here where my mouse is.
I mean, onto Blair.
Yeah, everything comes in and out here, correct?
Everything comes in and out of the mid-block walkway?
No.
Look over to the left.
Brenda was leaning too far, I couldn't see.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Here's our drive. So we had discussed with planning about having the mid-block be here where the actual drive is. And these kind of comments, I think, came up of it being shared as a driveway in the mid-block, which kind of doesn't make sense. So being here on access, also now coming through our sort of little parklet that we have in front of our building, it sort of becomes that eventual extension of the full mid-block.
Okay, and so then the only vehicle access is really if they're circulating to that...
Across, correct.
Across to that extra parking.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
How are you programming the parking? Like, who is parking where?
This is all exclusive for residents of the building. We are offsetting parking for the co-working space at our property across the street, where we are overparked for residential. So we have parking for retail and co-working across the street.
It's neither here nor there, but I should mention that I haven't quite given up on the south parklet. From my understanding, the police department didn't say no. They said no right now. They would be interested in allowing that to be a parklet, but didn't want it to be until such time as the other block was ready to go. So I'd love a scenario, actually, where that is the true mid-block walkway. I think we have a lot more space to play with. It's open, it's inviting. Given that they would make a requirement that it not be changed until such time as the other lot is ready to receive it. We will provide something in the case that never happens, is kind of our thinking here. But my personal hope is that we'll have a big fat park on the south of this at some point. But until then, we're complying with the code.
How much vehicular traffic do you think is going to be crossing that walkway on a regular basis? Is that?
It's roughly half of our stalls are on this side, I believe. Again, it's always interesting for us. We're on a heavy transportation line, buses, very walkable to downtown. I don't know the residents of the building who they're going to be, and even if they might be going out on the weekends, not sure. Difficult question to answer.
But how many units?
7 stalls that are...
How many parking stalls?
You're not seeing the whole lot here. Let me go to the full plan. Here we go. That's not even the full plan, sorry.
And vehicles can or cannot enter the parking structure from the east side?
Cannot.
Cannot.
Everything's off of Blair.
20 or 30 cars, maybe twice a day, cross that. So
23.
Your usage rate might be 99.99% no cars.
And how will the pedestrians be made aware of a car coming through? Is there like a note as a
So
light or
this gate
something?
would be automated and it would roll open. You would hear that. Sometimes those gates do and don't have beepers installed on them. There's a lot of ways that could happen.
Okay.
Likely there's not going to be any real pedestrian traffic until...
Yeah, it's more going to be...
it's a placeholder.
Yeah.
For right now.
Correct. And, depending on what development happens on these other sides, there could be some, agreed easement that there is, access in other, to alleviate having to cross it.
Are you building with the ability to enter that lot from the east or no?
Not our property, and it's.
Your lot is configured that you could add an entrance.
Yes.
At that.
If it worked out.
Becomes available.
Yeah. That's where the drive aisle currently is. There's a parcel here that's a parking deck, and this parcel that's also a parking deck. So we could hypothetically have something, here and here.
Instead of a street with a crosswalk, it's a walkway with a street walk.
I actually think it's super innovative, and I quite like it. You just want to make sure that the pedestrians are safe and feel safe going through there. But I'm incredibly appreciative that you're holding that as a placeholder because I think it'll be so valuable in the long run, and that forward thinking is great. So I'm super thrilled that you added that.
We'll likely do some OS&E planting stuff in there for the interim while it's sort of just a spot to sit, you know. So we have a similar condition in a building in New Orleans where our entrance to our building is actually where let's say the easternmost point of this walkway would be. You actually walk under the building to get to the entrance. It's a big public kind of area that you can actually sit into. So. Do you guys have any other questions on what was presented by Amy, on the design?
And just talk me through why you did the transition instead of kind of making them look like 3 different buildings.
So SQ Dimas Ripple, the architect, we all came here. They're very much aware of the library, the public safety being sort of a, aggressive pieces of architecture. EDR is typically aggressive as architect as well. They're very interested in this bar building. It was at one point during the RFP, it was an L-shaped building. And then we thought it was more dynamic and softer to do this because the L-shaped building was sort of a bar and it just turned. This is sort of a kind of erosion as you go down Blair, if you will, with both windows and materials. So here at the co-working space, which is commercial, it's very, very formal and masculine with these tall vertical windows. And as you go down, it becomes residential, a little more playful. There's basically a little, if I can find the right page. Might be the very last slide, actually.
For the other building, just remind me, the one that's on the other side of Blair.
Mm-hmm.
What is on the corner there that's on like I guess that would be the southeast corner?
On that side, so basically that's where we have our big bike storage room on the end of People's Way in Blair. It's where our bike storage is for A.
And that
on the ground floor.
That bike storage is facing the public safety building's inlet too. So we didn't have the opportunity to do anything really deep on that particular corner because we had to preserve their entrance.
So this slide is a little vignette that explains sort of let's call it the commercial bleed into the residential and the approach to the glazing, the material. So at residential, which is sort of on the south side here, you have this corrugated panel, which makes the residential window read differently than the co-working space.
Anything else for them right now?
So are you comfortable with the recommendations that staff has made in the report?
We plan to discuss them with Amy tomorrow while we're here and then continue to work on them. I believe, in our mind, and speaking to what Chris was mentioning, we had removed that lenticular mural in favor of thinking that we would eventually have some park here and providing a mural here. In our opinion, this move with the sort of, if I can find the slide, that as a massing is already very aggressive. And when you have light and shadow, which you can kind of see it reading here in elevation, let me get to the vignette. You have essentially this protrusion of the building entrance, the little cut for the mid-block, but we had proposed, like she was mentioning, to activate this with a lenticular type mural, which would only be discernible from that much southern point of the building. Feeling that these materials alternate and then it's also stepping back, we felt that was active enough, and we moved that mural to the south, back when we were thinking that the mid-block would be there. To us, it's more advantageous to have a mural there anyways, but we'll work on that one with them. I think the only other one was there was a recommendation for us to provide a 3-foot knee wall at the parking, which what's sort of not discernible here is that behind that screen where the parking is, we actually have our electrical meter rooms here and here. So The only parking that's actually, let's say if you were driving up and you had headlights pointing out, would be these two spots here, because these are behind a solid wall, as are these two. And then these two spots here actually fall behind the metal panel where it comes to the ground. So we'll have to clarify. I'm not sure if the recommendations for that knee wall to be only on this Blair Street side or if it's all sides of the site. But those were the 2 points, I think, on the 6 or 7 she had made for us to work on with her. And we do still need to clarify the sort of LED lighting of this screen and her other recommendations.
So your preference, though, is not to do that?
The knee wall and the lenticular mural, yeah. But again, willing to discuss.
How many units is this again?
126 micro units.
This one have true affordable housing in it again, like your last one?
Yeah, this one's interesting in that it's, I think, the first project in Salt Lake in a decade to provide 40% AMI units without the use of 9% tax credits. So that part of the innovation of the building is how it's financed, not just how it looks.
40% of the units are at 40% or less of AMI.
Yeah, 40 of the units. And that the whole build, and we have a substantial number of 80% AMI units as well. So no, and those are all deed restricted land use restriction agreements, so they're true affordable housing.
Okay, are we done with questions for the time being?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no hot tub on the roof, but it is accessible over the office space.
Okay, would you guys step back? And we'll open the public hearing on this item. So is there anyone from the community council? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And we'll bring back Amy and the applicant. Now you can ask your question, Brenda.
So in general, I like the idea that we're using a kind of transition of materials and fenestration to denote the different parts of the building. And I think it's going to be really a very, as I've said before, a very interesting project. And so I'm not concerned at all about the building length issue. I'm a little concerned about the part where it goes past parking. And so tell me about that material on that area there.
So at the, on Blair, it's basically a mesh, a metal mesh that, I think there's
There's a detail of that.
going the
isn't
other
there? Yeah.
direction. I think it's page
24
Yeah.
for us, yeah, okay. And where has that been used here? I lost some examples somewhere, but.
Hey, there you go. Well, that's an older one, but it includes the same precedent image. Go up a couple more, maybe.
So it feels transparent, at least when the lighting is correct, right? More or less transparent?
This was in your...
Yeah, right, okay, thank you. And I am concerned that this will actually, and this is really kind of a different concern, that this will actually appear flatter than your west elevation shows, because you've got the shadows coming, as is often the case in architectural drawings, as if we all had the sun in the north. So, so the shadows. I want to tell you that this is not unusual. This happens all the time. It's not even not intentional. Sometimes that makes the drawing look better to have things go this way than that way. I don't know why, but it can fool the eye into thinking that that the shadow would make this a lot more, have a lot more three-dimensional play than they actually will, because the light's going to be coming from the other direction and will not give you as much play as you think it will.
So we're proposing there's a very thin soffit above the screen. There's an image of it that we're proposing to install LED lighting that could be washing the screen. So that would be giving it light from both the front, and then you'd have the interior building lighting. What that image on the left doesn't really represent is, as I mentioned, there's some solid surface behind the screen along most of it as well. So you won't really read the cars behind it, except for at those first two northernmost stalls.
6 source. Oh, really? So it's solid behind that?
Yeah, if you look at we have.
Oh, I see, it's electrical closets.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
ma'am.
okay. So the
but
issue
this-
of the facade itself, though, and the push and pull of it, it's not really any push, it's any pull, it's all mostly push. So, is there some kind of rendering of this? Do you have a rendering somewhere that actually shows shadows as they are really going to be happening?
We could create one. I think this was a vignette that was done just for this response to look at the lighting, but.
No, I meant in the whole building, not just this part.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about the
Right.
whole curve, where the curve actually doesn't show with shadow lines as it is shown in this drawing. Not this drawing, the elevation drawing.
Sure. One without shadows on, you're talking about?
Well, one that shows shadows accurately.
Well, if you just go down a couple pages.
Page.
Next one.
The one on the elevations on page 19 are not showing the shadows accurately on the elevations on the
No, that
east
doesn't
elevation.
have the sun turned on, so.
So
It
that
does
does
on
give
the-
us it does give
yeah.
us a different sense of how that curve works
Mhm.
than it would in reality, because it's not going to shade and shadow like that.
Sure.
It's going to be much flatter looking than this shows. Like I said, this is not unusual, not a killer, but for example, even on the building section of the front, where they're showing, again, the number 1 is correct on of the east guys. Number 1 is the correct way to show it, but the actual building elevation is showing the sun coming from the north. And that makes a difference, because it does actually not give you that deep shadow line that you're wanting.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, that it's
And what do you want them to do about it?
Well, there's nothing, I just want everybody to realize that this isn't going to look exactly like that. I would like to see a drawing that is accurate, but I don't want to hold this project up.
Okay.
So I just want to point out that this isn't going to be,
That it won't look quite like that.
it won't look quite like that.
So in some ways, then, that makes me feel like having that mural on the west does make more of a visual impact, since this would appear more flat at that southern end. Right? Is that what you're saying?
It would appear more flat on that southern end, yes.
Okay.
Saying it would appear more flat from the west, not the south.
From the west, right.
From the west. If you're looking at it from the south, you'll have the articulation of the building.
I think our main
Yeah,
point
if
is
you look at
that
it
the
from
shadow
south,
shown is not
the
possible.
articulation will be very strong.
Yeah.
Right. But if you look down the street or look at it from the west, it won't be as much. So, that being said, I will reiterate, I like the design of this building quite a bit, so I'm not calling for any action.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Anybody ready to make a motion?
Well, I have a question for Amy about the knee wall issue. Is
Okay.
your recommendation that they have it all the way across the parking?
This was just related to Blair Street, because that's where they are proposing the
But
mesh
for
screening
every
wall.
stall, or only those that are visible?
Well, it's
Or
not
not quite
really
visible, but-
clear in in their design how the blank wall is going to be integrated, I guess, into that screen, like where those mechanical areas, and they have some doors in those areas too. So we're just asking for a little bit more detail. It wasn't clear to me that those stalls would be blocked by a wall, so that was part of the reason why we requested the knee wall as a condition of approval. But that's something that we can work out the details with. If that's not actually visible from the public way, then the knee wall may not be necessary. That was just an additional screening measure to make sure that vehicles that are parking, the lights don't flood the public way.
I think it looks cool the way it is.
So the way you have it drafted is it's a minimum 3-foot solid knee wall shall be provided along all ground level parking to screen the headlights from the public way.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're saying is only as to those parking spaces that might be visible from the street, right?
So yeah, the modifications they're requesting are all along Blair Street, and so that's where we're asking for some additional information for screening on the design, because again, sorry, I don't know why these plans take so long to load, but in most of those areas, it looks like from the rendering that the screen mesh comes all the way down to the ground. And so it might be nice to have some type of solid foundation just to kind of make that design element a little bit more clear, and also screen headlights from the public way. But if those areas are blank wall behind there, that may be different, and that's not something that is clear in the plans that have been provided to us.
I'm just working with the wording of the condition, which is there's not much wiggle room in how it's drafted. That's my only question.
So, Amy, if the motion is passed as you've worded it,
Mm-hmm.
could you have the flexibility then to determine that they've met the intent of that without a 3-foot knee wall? Is I think the
In every
question.
location.
I would take that condition out, just because I think that a knee wall is not in the vocabulary of that part of the building. And I think that actually what would really be nice there is a very smooth surface all the way to the ground. And also when it is lit from time to time, when people pass by it, having it lit all the way to the ground would be more dramatic. So I would take that knee wall out entirely.
Can we take the knee wall out, but ensure that no headlights can be seen through? Does that matter for safety? I mean, why were you including that?
We looked at several places just to try and get an idea of some design standards related to screening, because we have requirements, that parking areas be screened, but we don't really have specific requirements as far as, how they're screened. And so that's just something that was a common standard that we found related to floodlights into the public way. It can disorient pedestrians, et cetera. So that's why we included that.
But applicants, you said it was only like 2-4 stalls, something small.
Correct. It's pretty small, but again, I agree with all your opinions. It's something we can look at.
You could easily fix. So I can see taking out the knee wall all the way around, but if we had put in that, if that matters.
I don't want
I
to
can
make
go
it a
either way.
requirement of their design if
Well,
it's not needed.
you can somewhat discern here that, what's shown in the render on the left is we have, looks like maybe a 12-inch thing at the bottom that receives the mesh coming down. Probably just to give it a frame to attach to, but
If there are no more questions to the applicant, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
So one, I will say from my own comment, I'm a little disappointed that the center of Blake Blair and People's Way doesn't have any reason to go to in that block. I think it's cool what's happened to the whole block. I would love to, but there's nothing really to pass through that whole Blair Street or on People's Way unless you're walking from one place to another, and that's a little bit disappointing. But I'm super appreciative of the design, what you guys have done for the project, and the affordable housing component that was both in A and B is a rare thing that's come before here, and really appreciate you guys reaching way out to try to meet some of those goals. So based on the findings listed in the staff report and the planning staff's opinion, that the phase 2 of the exchange development, Building B, generally meets the applicable standards for approval. Therefore, recommends that the Planning Commission approve conditional building and site design review petition PLN PCM 2018-00470 for modification of the specified design standards in the zoning ordinance and the plan development request PLN PCM 2018-00434 for the modification of the parking lot landscaping requirements listed in the applicable sections of code with the conditions of approval listed in the staff report, with the exception of the 3-foot solid knee wall should be provided along all ground level parking to screen headlights. That can be removed or delegated to staff if the current designs of the building meet the intent of public safety and public safety and other kind of common design practices. And the final approval of all the details can be delegated to planning staff.
A second?
Second.
Who did that first?
I didn't do it.
Oh, so who did?
Did
Brenda.
Did we
Okay.
want to address the mural, or was that addressed? Okay. I mean, I just didn't know if that was
It's in
forgotten.
the
I mean,
staff-
it's to
staff
require it to be
recommendation.
back to the way it was before.
No,
I don't.
no,
I
that
probably don't
was
have
not
opinion on
Okay.
whether the mural is on the south side or if it's on the cascading part. So if someone does feel strongly, then
I mean, I think the applicant had just said that you'd rather not have it on the.
We would prefer it to be on the south side, but again, it's,
isn't that where it is now?
excuse me?
Isn't that where it is now?
No, they are talking about another little mural. Not little, but
We had originally shown it on each little sliver as the building stepped back, so it was like sort of a lenticular. And then when we were looking at the mid-block B,
You want the one on the side, the one with the girl and the turtle?
the turtle is the preferred, not the actual mural.
Staff recommendation is
We're actually
to
doing
put
a
it
mural with that artist in
on
New
the
Orleans.
lenticular.
yes, that's, yeah, and I actually would agree with that versus.
Staff?
Yeah. And not, since this one is not going to be part of the walkway anymore.
I do not have an
take
opinion
that
on
out.
this. So the staff is recommending leaving it as shown on the left. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's not what is
Yeah.
proposed. Yeah, that was shown at the work session, and
I'll
the
take
south
staff's
isn't.
recommendations unless someone else wants to amend. I'll take an amendment if someone feels strongly from the commission.
Everybody good with staff?
Well, let's be clear, because I don't think we're being very clear. The staff recommendations are that the west elevation, so can we take these one by one and so say yay or nay on these? Is that appropriate, Chair?
Beyond the
We have a motion
Beyond
on
the
the table,
mural?
so
Are we-
you
do
have
you
to
wanna
make-
expand
No, like
beyond the mural?
1, 2, 3, 4, no, there's
a lot of-
there's a lot of staff recommendations, and I want to make sure we get the ones we want and not the ones we don't want into this motion.
So are you amending the motion?
discussion. Let's.
For the second, Brenda's, right? So you
It's on
can-
the second.
I guess you're gonna take away your second if you want to take this a different direction.
Elevation of Blair. Sure, I can take a few minutes and work through one by one. So the Blair Street parking garage west elevation, we've essentially delegated the 3-foot knee wall to if it's needed or not. Staff can make that decision or remove it entirely. Is everyone okay with that? But the rest of the design detailing we all kind of are good with. Number 2, your submit details regarding screening material. Applicant seems fine with getting more detailed about the screening stuff. People good with more details. More details always better. East elevation adjacent to Blair Street shall be, oh, this is a mural. This is number 3 we're talking about. Should be the lenticular mural as presented at the work session. The modification is 60% of active
the
uses
west
in the-
elevation?
Yeah, that's actually a typo on number 3. It's supposed to say the west elevation
right.
adjacent to Blair Street.
I mean, my personal impression is if you're coming on Blair Street, walking north, whether the mural is on the south side as presented with the woman on the turtle, or the other one where you can't really see it but helps articulate the building design a little bit, I still feel like that's visually interesting, probably. And with the way that's structured, I don't think the mural's gonna be covered up, the girl on the turtle. I don't really have an opinion on which design is planning. Anyone else in the planning commission have?
I certainly don't want both, one or the other.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm looking for more rationale as to maybe, I know you said it before, but why you changed it and why you recommend putting it back.
So,
I'm gonna articulate the curve. They're trying to make it easier to paint.
Gotcha.
that's actually not why we were proposing that.
Good try, Matt.
That's where I went.
And so following the work session, there were some comments from commissioners when the mid-block walkway was initially supposed to go to the south.
Right.
And so how that facade would relate to the walkway. Now that walkway is not proposed there. The south elevation isn't subject to any design standards. It's not adjacent to a public street. It's actually right at the property line. And if the south property were to redevelop and unfortunately let's say worst case scenario, they didn't allow the parklet like we had hoped, they also may not have a setback requirement there. And so it could be built, we may not ever see the girl on the turtle. But on the west elevation, they are requesting several design modifications, and one of those is related to active use. And so although they're not requesting a modification to the visual interest, in staff's opinion, we think that that should be more visually activated if they're proposing non-active uses along that facade. So that is the reason why we requested that be a condition of approval, that they add in the
Doesn't seem to be
previous
a make or
one.
break for you guys.
No, and just to be honest, too, our opinion on the lenticular mural, even with what's shown there and talking to our architect, was that if it were to be a lenticular, we'd probably do some sort of chromatic color. Would it be, because you wouldn't be able to discern a like very graphic thing splayed across, it's going to be like 100 feet of slivers of the building.
Would that,
So-
oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
So it'd be more like, imagine like a rainbow gradient or something
That's
like that.
exactly what it should be.
Yeah.
Or an interactive, like you said here, an interactive lighting installation.
Would people be
That'd be
okay
better.
if I modify this to just delegate the mural to staff and they can decide in a discussion between?
And wasn't that what you did in your
No.
original motion?
Because our
Well, why
original
don't-
motion has the lenticular mural.
I would take number 3 out entirely, because that, that is a very specific thing. And then instead, we have number 4, which is some kind of visual something.
I'm good with that too.
Okay, Matt, can you make that amendment?
Wait.
I'll read you the motion when it's here. I'm fine with
No,
taking 3
wait,
out.
we're saying, I'm trying to read these, we're saying they don't have to do a full mural. They just need to do something on Blair Street,
Yeah.
something visual.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, no. This makes such a huge, beautiful statement. Or they can put something little that's visual.
Again,
No, are you kidding me?
I can guarantee you that we will be doing a mural somewhere on this building beyond the one that we show up at the front, the shop slot.
Okay,
It's-
I mean,
How about let's go back to mine then. I'm gonna leave the mural in, delegate to staff to meet the objectives, and make a decision that fits visual interest of the building along Blair. That's the point. I'll restart the whole thing. 4, visual interaction along Blair Street. We're all good with visual interaction, public art, interactive lighting. Public easement development, number 5, recorded. Yes, I actually really like the mid-block walkway coming off of the public safety walkway. I think that looks really nice, so I like that being there. Approval for signs, art, it's fine. So signs being approved by staff and approved for specific items identified by the staff report. As long as the zoning applies. Okay. I think we got it.
Okay.
Doing this one more time.
Restate the motion.
All right, starting over. Based on the findings in the staff report, I move that the Planning Commission approve condition building site review design PLN PCM 2018-00470 for the modification of specified design standards and zoning ordinance, and a plan development request PLN PCM 2018-00434 for the modification of the parking and landscaping requirements listed in the zoning ordinance. With the exception of with the conditions listed in the staff report, with the exception of on 1 bullet point 2 regarding the knee wall, that requirement be removed delegate to staff just to make sure that the public safety is maintained as people move in on the parking garage. And that number, or what would I agree to doing? Oh, and that number 3, condition number 3 is modified just so there is a mural of some kind along the building that provides visual interest as people come from the south to the north along Blair.
Along the west elevation.
Along the west elevation. West to the east.
The west elevation.
West elevations, yeah. I'm talking about how people are walking. You guys are talking about the building facing.
Yeah.
I think we're on the same. With final approval and details noted and the being delegated to staff.
Okay, Brenda, are you willing to second
I'm
it?
willing to re-second that motion,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, have we discussed this enough?
So I'm now confused about the mural because when I'm looking at it from the west heading east, thinking about Brenda's comments that this is going to appear more flat than we're kind of seeing, and that so would this mural also then give me visual interest if I'm looking east from that walkway? From People's Way.
You won't see it at all. I won't change it.
You won't see it
It's
unless
more,
you might
it's more from
move
a
it
south,
bit.
from a south and looking
Okay.
south.
I needed to
The
just
entrance
clarify
of
that.
the safety building. You'll
Both of
see it
these
from there.
murals
All right, thank you.
you're seeing from the
Okay.
south.
Okay, let's try a vote on this.
Okay.
Adrian,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Weston.
I think I was a little hesitant on this project last time, and I don't. Maybe I'm in a better mood tonight, but I think it looks really good, and I think this is proof why work sessions are so helpful to come and have a discussion about it and to go back and do some modifications. And I think you really listened. I'm excited about the walkway. I think that's actually really cool. I think it's a cool building. Thank you for your work. So yes.
I like a lot of elements of this project. Thank you. Yes. Oh, thanks. I just jumped
Okay.
in.
That's okay. Clark?
Yes.
Okay, you got it unanimously.
Thank you.
Nick all cracked up about it. Nick,
Okay,
are
I
you
think we're
looking at
done.
pornography?
The meeting's adjourned.
They do.